Story 1. I suspect something between my girlfriend and my friend. We all live together. Am I imagining things? I'm really freaking out right now because if what I suspect is true, this living situation is about to get really complicated. Please tell me I'm just crazy. Sorry if this is long. Background. We are two couples living together. We all attend the same university. The apartment was originally leased by my girlfriend of about 2 years, Alexis, and our mutual friend, Brooke. The apartment is huge and expensive. There was originally supposed to be 3 girls living there, but the last one backed out abruptly. They were planning on moving somewhere cheaper, but they had put a lot of work into the apartment and loved it so much they hated the idea of leaving. I offered to move in when my lease was up in May so we could split the rent and utilities 3 ways. I was sleeping over often anyways. Both girls were absolutely ecstatic about the idea. Shortly before I moved in, Brooke started dating my best friend, Derek. This was cool because now both couples got to hang out with their best friends and SOs all at once. It seemed perfect. Derek began sleeping over a lot, and when his parents sold their house and left in October, he temporarily moved in. We haven't really pushed for him to find a new place because splitting everything 4 ways is helping all of us so much. But again, only Alexis and Brooke are on the lease. The apartment owner surprisingly does not mind as long as rent gets paid because we are always quiet. There are 3 incidents that made me think something was up. If it weren't for these combined incidents, I would never make an accusation like this because Alexis is such a sweet and shy girl, and Derek has been a brother to me. They don't seem flirty, but as I mentioned before, all 4 of us are very close friends, so we spend a lot of time together. Incident 1. MWF. Brooke and I have early classes, so we're gone by 8 a.m. Derek and Alexis start in the afternoon, so it's not unusual for them to leave together, though they usually take separate cars. One of these days, I decided to wait for Alexis outside of her class so I could surprise her with lunch. I watched everyone shuffle out of the class, but Alexis wasn't with them. I texted her asking where she was, and she replied, "Just got out of class, going to go home to study." I called her to see if I had just barely missed her or something, and there was no response, which I considered weird because she had just texted me a second ago. She didn't answer until much later, which is also unusual for her. She's one of those girls that's often on her phone. I ran into Brooke later in the day, and she mentioned in passing that Derek had stayed home sick. She was going to bring him soup, blah blah. At the time, I didn't think much of it. When I got home later that night, I noticed Alexa's car was in the exact same spot she usually parks in guest parking because our unit only has 3 spaces. As a result, her car moves a lot. I asked her if she'd gone to class, and she got quiet before sheepishly admitting to skipping because she felt the professor sucked at explaining things, but she knows I hate when she skips classes, something that's gotten her grades in trouble before, but she recently started doing better. I kissed her and said I trusted her judgment. While I was doing the dishes, she explained how she probably won't skip again because being bored alone in the house was the worst. I laughed and we went about our business. At night, we went to bed, and as I laid there drifting off, it hit me. She shouldn't have been alone because Derek was homesick, right? She was still up on her phone. So I popped awake and asked her where Derek was today since Brooke had said he was homesick. She seemed startled by the question, but that may have been for me being half asleep to suddenly wide awake with a random question. She said he was here a bit in the morning but went to do errands or something. She wasn't sure. After the other incidents, I realized that the scattered way she answered this question seemed off, but that may just be my imagination. Incident 2. I went to throw some stuff out in the kitchen garbage when I noticed a condom wrapper that was the exact same brand Alexis and I use. It wasn't super visible, sort of tucked behind a cereal box, but the distinctive color caught my eye. Brooke and Derek always use a different brand, free from the University Health Center, while ours are expensive Trojans. It was weird because we usually keep the wrappers in our respective room's garbage can, so they never appear in the kitchen. Furthermore, because of exams and general stress, Alexis and I hadn't slept together in a few days. I didn't really dig around for a used condom or anything. I just went back to the room to check if any of ours were missing. I really couldn't tell because we buy in bulk. My first thought was that Brooke and Derek had ran out and broke into our stash, and I was upset that they hadn't even asked. Later that night, I mentioned the condom wrapper to Alexis, and her eyes got wide. When I mentioned my theory, she got unusually distressed. She's always very calm and went on a rant about them violating our privacy. I suggested we talk to them about it, and she immediately shut the idea down and made me swear not to bring it up unless they did it again. She didn't want to have this awkward conversation, which was weird to me because we're all generally pretty open about sex given that we live together, though it is possible that Alexis was being genuine because she's from a conservative small town, and she doesn't talk about these things as much as we do. Incident 3. Me and Derek are cool with the dudes in the apartment next to us who are graduates from our university. We don't hang out or anything, but we have the kind of relationship where we make small talk about sports or whatever in the hall and are comfortable asking the other to keep it down without it being awkward. Last Monday, during our break, I was locking up when no one else was at the apartment when I ran into one of the guys from next door. We talked football for a bit, and then he mentioned that one of the couples in the apartment is really a fan of morning sex and that the walls were way too thin. I laughed because Alexis and I usually had sex weekend mornings when we had the house to ourselves. Brooke and Derek usually spend weekends at her parents' house about an hour and a half away. The more I thought about it later in the day, the more I realized we hadn't been having morning sex in about a month on the weekends. It had been more towards the evening or not at all. Did he mean on weekdays? My heart sort of dropped. I kind of want to ask him to elaborate, but the conversation ended and I feel like I missed my chance, plus it's a weird thing to ask, and I feel like I must be being paranoid. So there you have it, our SL relationships. Am I crazy? Am I looking for signs that aren't there? Or is something up? And if so, how do I proceed? I don't want to ask her just yet because 1, I don't want to come off as crazy and jealous if nothing's up. 2, if something is up, I don't want them to start hiding it better. I was thinking of dropping by one of those mornings they're alone together, but I don't know how to time it right. If I drop by too early or late, they might get more cautious. Update 1. I suspect something between my girlfriend and my friend. We all live together. Am I imagining things? A lot of you requested an update to my original post. The majority of you suggested that I speak to Brooke and/or attempt to walk in on the act. I decided on doing both. Sunday night, everyone was back in the apartment. I had every intention of speaking to Brooke about the neighbor's comment alone. But before I could, she said something that completely threw my theory off. She told Derek to get to bed so he wouldn't be tired for work in the morning. What? I knew Derek has a job on campus, but he had always worked the same night shifts. Being as casual as possible, I inquired how long he'd been working mornings and when he started. He said he picked up the extra shifts a month ago and worked at 9 o'clock. I leave at 7:45, so it's possible for me not to have noticed that. I spent the rest of the night trying to figure out whether he was lying about that, whether still he had some mornings here at home, whether Alexis could be seeing someone other than Dirk in the mornings like some of you suggested, or again, if I was just a paranoid loser. I went to bed feeling emotionally drained and confused. The next morning, I left for classes as usual and operated on autopilot. I alternated between thinking I'd run home to check on Alexis and thinking I had way too much work to run around based on a theory that I wasn't even sure about anymore. In the end, I walked out of my first class and straight to my car to go home. In a weird way, I sort of wish I hadn't. When I got to the apartment, Derek's car wasn't there, just Alexis. I walked to the apartment with my heart pounding all sorts of crazy. I don't know what I was expecting. Outside the apartment door, I could immediately hear a guy's voice inside. I heard him talking and laughing and a soft feminine mumble replying and giggling back. I've been on this subreddit long enough to see all the different reactions people have to this situation. I never once contemplated what I'd do. I pressed my ear to the door and see if I could make out what they were saying, but I could only make out a word here and there. There was a lot of giggling. Then I heard the sound of Alexis being tickled and shrieking. Maybe I should have waited more. In retrospect, I wish I did, but I couldn't take it. As soon as I started fiddling with my keys, it was dead silence in there. She was effing Mark. I never mentioned Mark in the previous post, but he's one of the guys in the apartment next to us. Not the one that tipped me off. He's the only one I never liked. Effing know-it-all. Douchebag attitude. Always made inappropriate comments towards both girls. Never thought anything of it. As soon as I opened the door, they both gave me a deer-in-headlights look that removed any naive doubt I may have retained that the situation was innocent. I was planning on yelling at them or demanded answers. But, and this is effing embarrassing, my eyes began to well with tears. I didn't want them to see that, so I said, "Nice, real EFF-inus," and bolted back to my car. I heard Alexis yelling my name in the hallway and picked up the pace. I sort of expected her to be chasing me, but by the time I got to the car, there was no one following me. I drove to a park that's near the apartment and sat there in disbelief. My first thought, weirdly enough, was how is my family going to take this? What the hell am I going to tell them? My family effing gloved Alexis. They joked about our wedding and regularly called her part of the family. Then I started thinking about living arrangements. Our finals end in about 2 weeks. There's no way I can handle moving now. I'm applying to an extremely competitive graduate program, and I can't let anything get in the way of that. Definitely not this cheating. I'm writing this from a friend's house. I explained the situation. He explained it to his parents, and they welcomed me to stay in their home. I'm gonna have to go back home to get some clothes sometime. I'm planning on going during this lab period. I know Alexis can't skip tomorrow. Took her an hour or so to start blowing up my phone. But once she did, it didn't stop. She started off asking me to come home so she could explain. Before I even had the chance to respond, she sent another one begging me to come back because she was having an anxiety attack, something I always help her through. Maybe I'm heartless, but all I could think was, "Good. You earned it." There was a pause. And then she said, "I don't know why you get so jealous, we were just hanging out." I waited. She sent, "Look, I know it looks super sketchy. Believe me, if I were you, I'd think the same thing, but we didn't do anything. He needed advice on his girl problems. You have to believe me." No, I don't. Normally, I would have gotten a weird sense of satisfaction watching a cheater scramble to cover their ass. But my stupid brain just kept replaying all these great times we had together and wondering if she was cheating then too. I want to know when this started, but at the same time, I'm worried it's been going on for longer than the month I've suspected something. I received a text later that night from a number I didn't recognize. It was the nice dude from next door. He said, paraphrasing because it was a long text, that he got my number from Derek. He was extremely sorry for what I was going through and that he would have told me sooner, but he wasn't completely sure. He said he knew his friend was seeing a girl with a boyfriend but didn't put it together until he learned the girl's name. As many of you suspected, the comment was him trying to tip me off. So yeah, I go bro of the year. I don't think Derek and Brooke know yet. I haven't texted them. I haven't found the words. I know it's going to turn our living arrangement and friendships upside down. I guess I should message them before Alexis paints a different picture. I wonder what the cool neighbor said when he asked for my number. I don't think he told them. They would have said something, right? Unless they took her side. Then I've lost my girlfriend and friends. Any advice on coping with something like this, especially from those who have been there before? Please let me know. I don't have many friends to reach out to besides the guy I'm staying with. Alexis, Brooke, and Derek were basically my family. Alexis and I had talked about spending our lives together. I have never been serious about a girl the way I was with her. Edit. I am seriously moved by the amount of support you guys are giving me here. Please keep them coming. I may not reply to all the comments, but I've read each one on both posts. I'm going to tell Derek and Brooke soon. I'll try to do a follow-up when I have some sort of plan. Update 2. I suspect something between my girlfriend and my friend. We all live together. Am I imagining things? You wonderful people. Between the comments to both posts and my inbox, I have an immense collection of personalized pep talks which I am referring to whenever I feel down, admittedly a lot these days. I got advice, SL stories from all sorts of people, married, single, old, young. Wow, I never thought the internet would bring me this level of support. I just want you guys to know that by just typing up some comments, you have made a very real difference in someone's life. Got to say, it feels a little strange receiving 6 Reddit gold and making it to our /best of just for sharing the worst day of my life, huh? I got a lot of messages urging me to join Red Pill. This experience has soured my view of Alexis, not women in general. I got some messages saying I write too well and this is obviously made up. I have 2 words for you, I wish. A clarification on the last update. I wasn't clear about what I see when I walked in. They weren't literally doing it. They were just sitting on the couch with a deer in headlights look that was incredibly incriminating, and they both went quiet. It was just obviously not a "hey, guess who dropped by" situation. Anyways, on to the update. I've been extremely busy with the semester ending, and I took the majority's advice to bury my head in work. I've spent a lot of time at the library because Alexis goes there. In the process of posting the last update, I realized how dumb it was that I hadn't contacted Derek and Brooke with my side. I screenshotted the text from the cool neighbor. Well, side note, all names have been changed except Mark because you, Mark. Within the minute, Derek was blowing up my phone with calls and texts that made it very apparent he didn't know anything. At the same time, Alexis was sending texts begging me to meet up with her. I was feeling miserable and sent back a single text to Derek saying I wasn't feeling up to talking, then put my phone away for the night. In the morning, I got a text saying to meet him at my favorite restaurant for dinner and drinks on him, assuring me that no one would be there, not even Brooke. I haven't had any appetite since everything went down, but the offer meant a lot, and I really did want to see him, so I decided to go after classes. I got to the restaurant first, and I had my heart in my throat worrying that Alexis would somehow be there, but she wasn't. Derek came up to me and gave me a big hug and opened with, "Dude, what the hell?" So here's where it gets a bit crazy and dramatic. A lot of you suggested that Brooke might side with Alexis or had been covering up for her the whole time. I wasn't so sure because while she is closer to Alexis, her and I have been friends for a bit longer. According to Derek, as soon as he told Brooke, she was absolutely furious. In his words, I sort of wanted to F Alexis out, but Brooke took care of that and then some. Remember how I said Alexis came from a conservative small town? Her parents had no idea that we were living together, and she constantly stressed that they couldn't know or they'd cut her off financially. They liked me enough to be polite, but they were constantly worried a relationship would distract her from school and didn't want her getting pregnant or whatever. Derek said that Brooke demanded Alexis pack her things and find a new place, or she'd call up her parents and tell them everything. Derek told me that later that night, Alexis was sitting in the living room hugging a sweater I'd left behind and wailing at the top of her lungs that her life was over when Brooke yelled from her bedroom, "Well, maybe you shouldn't have F Mark then." Imagining that moment was kind of funny. Brooke's always been a very non-nonsense girl with a hot temper, but I definitely didn't expect this. It was extremely touching that she took the cheating that seriously. During that dinner, all my fears that I had lost my friends were completely washed away, and I was able to choke down a few pieces of sushi. When we left dinner, Derek promised to let me know when Alexis was gone so I could move back in. I declined his offer because one, even if she does move out, everything in that apartment reminds me of her, including Derek and Brooke too. Alexis and Mark probably did it in my room, so I really don't want to sleep in it. At 3 in the current emotional state, I don't want to be third-wheeling a happy couple even though I'm sure they'd be considerate. He understood my points but said to let him know if I changed my mind because Brooke and Alexis' friendship seems to be pretty over. This week has been pretty uneventful, but I keep having to dodge Alexis. Luckily, I'm in an undergraduate program that only has 60 students, so we have a lot of our classes together. I asked 2 friends to keep an eye out for her after giving them a spark notes of the story and started showing up to class at the last minute. As far as I know, she only waited outside of one of my classes. I got a text saying, "Has been spotted in front of classroom. Waterworks in progress. Proceed with caution." I ended up skipping the class because I didn't know if she was going to leave, and I really didn't want to risk it. Later that night, she sent me a really long Facebook message explaining everything from the beginning, and it sort of made me sick to read. I contemplated not reading it, but once I opened it, I just had to. She said that he'd been flirty with her in the halls. As I mentioned before, he would say inappropriate things to both girls, and she tried to be friendly back, but it must have come off as flirting because he kissed her mid-sentence one day. She said she felt guilty that she let him on and that guilt prevented her from shooting him down in future advances because she felt like it was her fault that happened, and she has trouble saying no. She said they'd only slept together 3 times, and she hated it. He had pushed her into it, not rape, but I never said yes either, and she was going to end it during the conversation I walked in on. She said she understood if I needed some time and some space, but that she'd do absolutely anything to make it right and would spend the rest of her life making it up to me by treating me like a king. I'd never have to cook, clean, or do my laundry again. give me full access to her phone and passwords. She even suggested we install Life 360, an app that allows you to track someone's location through their phone so I would know where she is at all times, cut off all contact with Mark and all her male friends just for good measure, I guess. Make up sex whenever I wanted. Yeah, that sounds like a healthy relationship, right? I didn't answer. I kinda wanted to keep her on Facebook and watch the show unfold. She was posting dramatic statuses and song lyrics about mistakes, forgiveness, and some from our song, but I know how I am. I don't want to compulsively check her page or go through old photos, so I blocked her. Derek sent me a text a few hours later saying, "She's crying and screaming about you blocking her LOL. In happier news, the family I'm staying with is fantastic." I felt a little guilty about taking up their space, electricity, etc., so I offered to put down rent and pay for some bills. I am unemployed, but my family gives me a decent allowance for rent and food, but they declined. The dad said, "First month's free, if you need more time here, then we'll talk about it," and winked. My friend was telling me that they have hosted his and his sister's troubled friends, so it wasn't a big deal. Still, I'm unbelievably grateful. As for Will, awesome neighbor, I called him to thank him for everything. I wasn't up to inviting him for dinner just yet, but I will. He apologized profusely. He says he can't stand Mark, not just for what he did with Alexis, but various other things that I won't go into. He told me that Mark has been unusually quiet the past few days and told another one of the guys that he had gotten dumped. Whatever, I don't want to think about it. So that's really all I have for you guys. I'm still going to be friends with Derek and Brooke, but I'm going to limit my contact with them because they remind me of Alexis so much. I sent Brooke a message thanking her for kicking Alexis out, and she said she'd do it regardless of whether or not I move back in. She's going to give me a heads up on when Alexis is gone so I can get the rest of my things. In the meantime, I'm spending a lot of time studying, applying to grad schools, and hanging out with a guy I'm living with. Earlier this week, I posted onto my university's Facebook group searching for roommates for next semester, and I already have a few replies. I'm going to wait until after finals to tell my parents about the situation because my mom asks a million questions about everything, and I'm not in the mood to answer them again. Thank you for all the messages. I did not expect this level of attention, and while it has made me a bit paranoid someone will recognize the story from the details, I needed the support. I effing love you guys. Update 3. I suspect something between my girlfriend and my friend. We all live together. Am I imagining things? Well, I really wasn't planning on updating, but a lot of you have prodded for one, and I do owe you guys after all the wonderful support I received. Once finals ended, I did well given the circumstances. Everything hit me like a ton of bricks. I mean, almost worse than the initial insult. I removed all my social media pictures with her, threw out stuff that reminded me of her, took our songs off my playlists, yada yada. We've been inseparable since we met, so this was over 2 years of accumulated memories. Long story short, it was very hard, but I had an urge to get it all done before the new year, that whole cliché new year, new me thing, I guess. I don't know. Anyways, one particular Redditor sent me a message about how Alexis might be driven to suicide now that she's lost everything, her closest friends, her boyfriend, and her apartment. I know that seems like an overdramatic prediction, but I couldn't get it out of my mind after reading it. What Alexis did was absolutely freaking terrible, but I felt like a final conversation might give me better closure and maybe help her understand that it's completely over and get her to move on. So I planned to meet with her before everyone went home for break. A lot of you were big on the icing her out, so I'm genuinely sorry to disappoint, but I had to do this for me. I sent Alexis, if you want to talk, we can meet up somewhere, but there's no way we can be together after what happened. So please don't ask. Okay? She responded almost immediately asking when and where. We arranged to meet at an off-campus coffee place. When I got there, she was already at a table and got up to hug me. I waved her away, and she jerked back like a puppy that had been kicked. I felt shitty immediately, but I wanted to get it over with. We made some stupid small talk. She asked how I'd been, how were finals, etc., but I sort of interrupted it. I asked her if she had been unhappy with our relationship. Her eyes got real wide, and she said no a bunch of times and got quiet, so I asked her why if she wasn't unhappy. Basically, she retold the story about having trouble saying no and him being so pushy. I stopped her and asked her to cut the BS and just take responsibility, That maybe it excused her actions up until he kissed her mid-sentence, but sex 3 times? Yeah, no. She looked down, shrugged, and muttered, "You're right, I know." At this point, she started tearing up and said she was so sorry, that I'd never understand how sorry she was. Then she asked if there was any chance we could be together again, which I was kind of expecting even though I told her not to. I just shook my head. I told her she could still live with Derek and Brooke if she wanted to, but she declined and told me she already had plans to move in with another girlfriend of hers. From here on out, the conversation went in circles with her trying to explain away her actions with her difficulty turning down guys due to her fear of being seen as a frigid, and me trying to get her to admit that excuse was garbage. I don't know why, I just really needed her to stop using that crutch and admit she had ruined a perfectly good relationship with a very real future all on her own. But she just wouldn't. She was always stubborn. Finally, I let it go, and we parted ways somewhat amicably. As I was leaving, she grabbed my hand and parted her lips to say something but ended up shaking her head and letting go. The conversation made me feel worse than I had before at first, but ultimately, it really made me see that she was never the kind of person I wanted to be with, even without the cheating. She never took responsibility for anything. Failed classes were because the professor was incompetent, not finding a job/internship was bad luck and not her lack of effort, etc. I just never really thought about it too hard. I think I was still in the honeymoon stage or something. Something equals I'm an idiot sometimes. So at this point, I leave the coffee place and ask Derek to hang out. I ended up going to the apartment, and although Brooke was there, she mostly stayed in her room. We drank some beers and played some video games. It really cheered me up. We also talked a bit about everything that happened. He admitted that they hadn't been able to find a third roommate aside from complete strangers they'd rather not move in with, and asked me again to stay with them. I could tell he really wanted me to, and I felt guilty about them being stuck with Elise, so I accepted. I told them I needed to wait until Alexis took all her things, though the furniture is hers from before I even moved in, and I still don't want to sleep in that bed. Also, Brooke apologized for getting so involved in the situation and yelling at Alexis. Apparently, her stepdad had cheated on her mom, and it's a sore subject for her. I told her I genuinely didn't mind, and she was welcome to do it again if the mood struck her. I also bought Will some food and drinks at a great place near campus. A lot of you wanted to know what the other Mark had done that had Will so pissed off. Apparently, he had to be harassed to pay rent, claimed he couldn't contribute to any of the household expenses like dish soap, light bulbs, cleaning supplies, and regularly came in yelling and laughing at odd hours and agreeing to keep it down, then carrying on at the same volume, the standard douchebag roommate crap. Really, Will is a really cool guy. We talked a lot about the situation with Alexis, but also about school and sports. It was actually pretty fun. I eventually did tell my folks about the situation, and as expected, my mom bombarded me with 1,000 questions and cried a lot, so that was fun. Going home made me feel a little better, but my older brother got engaged on Christmas Eve, and given the recent circumstances, I wasn't as excited for him as I should have been, which made me feel like a shitty sibling. Plus, it's all my family can talk about now, and I'm just not in the mood. Life isn't perfect now, but I'm doing better. Alexis moved her out, and I bought a second-hand bed and dresser off another student. I had my first round of classes last week, and although I'm going to sound like a total nerd, the courses are really cool, hands-on, and the professors are incredibly cool people. Derek and Brooke have been really supportive and don't make me feel like a third wheel at all. I saw Mark in the hallway once, and he totally ignored me and I ignored him, but the urge to punch him in the face was very real. I guess that's something that will go away over time. I almost wanted to call him out on the whole thing, but with the kind of person Will had described, the conversation would have gotten me nowhere and probably pissed me off more. Sorry this up isn't as exciting as the previous ones. Thank you for your love and support, Reddit. It really, really helped me through such a bad time. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Before we start, if you're enjoying this video so far, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Now let's continue. I paid for my mom's dream vacation to thank her for raising me alone. She brought her rude new family and forced me to share a room with the kids. I ditched them there. I, 29F, recently got promoted, and with it came a significant raise. So I asked my mother, 52F, if she'd like to take a vacation with me to Greece. My mother was pretty much my best friend while growing up because I didn't have a dad. My father passed away from a terminal illness about 2 or 3 years after my birth, and I barely have any memories of him. It was mainly my mother who took care of me and raised me, along with a little help from my grandparents. As a single mom, it was tough for her, but she never made me feel like I was a burden on her, and I'll always be grateful for that. So when I received this promotion, my very first thought was to take a holiday with my mother to repay her for everything she'd done. I could have asked my friends to come along, but I didn't because that's how much my mother meant to me. However, as soon as I asked her if she wanted to come along, she told me that she'd accompany me, but only if she'd be able to bring her husband and stepkids along with her as well. For context, my mother married her current husband, 49M, 3 years ago after being in a relationship for years with him. I had no idea that she was dating this man, and neither did anyone else, including her own parents. She sprung it on us with the news of her engagement, and we barely had any time to adjust to this when she told us about her relationship because by then, they were already engaged to be married, and within 6 months they got married too. My stepdad wasn't an unpleasant guy, but I just never got along with him for some reason. Maybe it was the fact that now he and his kids were suddenly my mother's first priority, or maybe he just never made an effort to connect with me or my grandparents, but for whatever reason we just didn't get along well. And whenever I'd visit my mother, we'd avoid talking to each other as much as possible. He also happens to have 2 kids from his previous marriage, and they're both in their teens. The oldest is a 16-year-old girl, and the younger one is a 14-year-old boy. I don't know for sure why his ex-wife left him, but as far as my mother is concerned, his divorce took place because his ex-wife was a conniving and selfish woman who didn't care about him or the kids, which is why she doesn't have custody of them anymore. She hasn't elaborated further, and I haven't asked her about it either because it doesn't concern me. My stepdad had been married for 6 years and had been divorced for almost 2 years when he finally met my mother and decided to be with her. All of them seemed to be quite together, so I didn't question my mother about her decision to want to include her family. Of course, it would be a lot of hassle and expenditure to book 4 flight tickets instead of 2 and 2 hotel rooms instead of 1, and I'd probably not be able to spend as much time with my mother as I thought I would. But I was fine with all of that because the purpose of this trip was to make my mother happy and sort of repay her for everything that she'd done for me throughout my childhood. So after a few days, I agreed to let her bring her family along. Luckily, I could afford it easily since I can afford to splurge a little after the raise. After almost 2 weeks of planning, we finally boarded our flights and landed in Athens last afternoon. We were all jet-lagged and tried to catch some sleep in the afternoon. Here, at the time, the kids napped in my room while my mother and stepdad took the one beside ours. I was surprised that the kids had chosen to crash in my room because I'd expected my mother to share a room with her family, but I didn't say anything since I'd assumed that this was just for the sake of convenience, and once they woke up, they'd move to the other room. Even after we were all done napping, they didn't move, but I didn't mind because all of us went out to have a look around locally yesterday. We then came back to the hotel, and the kids headed straight to my room, which is when I decided to talk to my mother and stepdad about it. I pulled them aside in the lobby and told them that I thought it was about time the kids switched rooms and they needed to say something to them. But my stepdad just laughed in my face and told me that if I wanted to give my mother a vacation that bad, then I should have also taken into consideration that she'd need babysitting services as well. He said it while laughing too, as if it was a hilarious joke. I didn't understand what he was talking about, and so he explained that since this was a vacation that I'd organized for my mom, so she could have some time off from her day-to-day exhausting life, then the least I could do for her was look after the kids and let them share a room with me. Then both of them smiled at me, thanked me, and left me speechless in the lobby. I was already doing the least I could do by taking her on vacation with me. How many kids would do that for their parents in this day and age? And honestly, I was doing the most I could because I was putting up with her family even though I'd only wanted to take her with me. And on top of that, I was the one paying for everything. So for them to expect me to babysit their kids as well was just ridiculous. If she'd wanted a break, then she should have just left them all at home and come with me by herself, like I'd planned for her to. So after a while, I went up to their room and tried to talk some sense into them again. But once more my stepdad intervened, and this time he was a lot less sweet about it. He told me point blank that I had to share the room with the kids because they'd earned this break, and then he shut the door right in my face before I could even say anything. And the best part was that my mom didn't even say anything to him. even though he was being extremely disrespectful and rude towards me. It was also ridiculous that he believed that they'd earned this break when it was actually I who had earned that promotion and the raise that had led to them being on this trip at all. And instead of being grateful for whatever I'd done, they had the audacity to be so disrespectful towards me. I was fuming when I got back to my room and saw the kids on the bed beside mine. I thought I'd try a different tactic, and I asked them if they'd be willing to shift to the other room, hoping that they'd say yes, but they didn't. They told me that their parents had told them to stay in whichever room I'd be in, and that's why they'd taken it for granted that they'd be sharing a room with me. I didn't say anything to them because it wasn't their fault that their dad was being a jerk, so I let them be and thought about what to do next for the next couple of hours, until at around 10 o'clock in the night when I realized that the kids had fallen asleep. I'd thought about it long and hard, and I realized that the only way out for me right now was to just leave without notifying any of them and leave them on their own. They've been really disrespectful and selfish, and there was just no way that my stepdad was going to boss me around on a vacation that I was paying for. I didn't think twice about it, and before I knew it, I grabbed all my bags and had made a run for it. I hadn't unpacked yet, so it was easy for me, and the hotel staff didn't care much either since I told them that I was checking out and that the rooms would be paid for by my mother and stepdad. It was a little past midnight, but after searching for a while, I found another hotel a little distance away from the one I was in. I was lucky enough to get an Uber without waiting for long, and within half an hour, I checked into the other hotel, which was better than the previous one because now that I'd managed to get rid of my mom and her family, I could finally afford to spend all that money on myself. I had a good night's sleep, and the first thing that I did this morning was book myself a full body massage at the hotel spa to put myself at ease and fully be able to enjoy the vacation that I'd intended to have after several months of working myself to the bone for this promotion. I'd already blocked my stepdad and mother the night before, so I wasn't too worried about hearing from them, and there was no way they'd be able to find out where I was. I was having the time of my life so far, but that was only until a couple of hours ago when, at lunch, I finally heard from my mother. She'd made a fake account on Instagram to get through to me and had sent me a message about how I was being cruel to all of them, especially her. She said that abandoning my family wasn't the way to go, and if I really felt so offended by the events of the previous night, then I should have waited until the morning to confront them and discuss this like a family until we came to a conclusion that everyone would be pleased with. But instead, I chose to abandon them in a strange country, knowing that they didn't have any money on them at the moment since their cards wouldn't work internationally, and the hotel staff was already hounding them for money since they'd been talking about checking out once they discovered that I'd left in the middle of the night without telling any of them anything about it. So essentially, they didn't have any money and would soon be thrown out of the hotel as well if they couldn't confirm that they'd pay for the rooms since I transferred the rooms to them instead before I left. So I couldn't be held responsible if anything went south, which I knew it would. My mother told me that she was incredibly disappointed in me and said that she hadn't expected this sort of juvenile and immature behavior from me and demanded that I come back immediately to sort things out and bail them out. It was that exact entitlement that pissed me off, and in the heat of the moment, I messaged her back saying that she was an adult and could sort things out on her own and to ask her husband for help since he's the one she relies on for everything now. And that pissed her off because after that message, she told me that she wished she'd never even agreed to accompany me on this vacation at all, and that she should have known that I was jealous of her new life and her new family, which is why I was going out of my way to trouble them. I don't think this is my fault at all. My reaction was probably how any sane human being in my situation would react to something like this in the same way. I'm not jealous. I'm just disappointed that she's not putting me before her own flesh and blood. But even that's okay since I'm an adult now. What I'm not cool with is being disrespected by people who are counting on me and her not even bothering to stand up for me when her husband is being so rude to me right in front of her. I'd like to apologize for abandoning my mother and her family in a different country because my stepdad tried to force me to share a room with my step-siblings on a vacation that I paid for. Update 1. Hey guys, so I didn't apologize to my mother, and neither did I get back in touch with her after I went through the comments here. I don't owe her as much as I thought I did, and the fact that I even offered to take her on vacation should have been enough for her to appreciate my efforts, but she just had to take it way too far. Not only did she demand that I let her bring her family along, but also that I give up my personal space and privacy to accommodate her stepkids. I don't even understand why exactly she'd expect me to sit with them and discuss things like a family when they're not even my family in the first place. Like, her husband is her husband and not my dad, and her kids are her stepkids, not my siblings. So I don't owe it to them to have any discussions with them of any sort, and I only abandoned them because they'd been incredibly disrespectful towards me, even though I'd been the one to even organize this vacation for them all. So the least they could have done was show some gratitude and respect to me, but they chose not to, and I really don't see anything wrong with what I did. The only place I'd say I went wrong was the fact that I even let my mother convince me to let her bring her family along with her on the vacation. They're not my family, and I don't owe it to her to let her enjoy the trip at my expense. But I thought that I needed to repay her, which is why I let myself be pushed around like this. She'd been a good mother to me, but that was no excuse for her to act so entitled now, and that's just my opinion. It's been one whole day, and I haven't responded to her, but she keeps texting me on and off. I haven't bothered to check her texts, and neither have I blocked her since then. She'll just make another account to bother me, so it's better to just let her ramble on and on since I've muted her and won't be bothered now. I'm enjoying my trip solo now. Update 2. LOL. My mom just showed up with the rest of her family at the hotel I'm staying at and threw a tantrum in the hotel lobby when they refused to let her up to see me or even tell them my room number, which is just normal hotel policy. I don't know why she was surprised at that. But anyway, when I went down to check out what she was here for, she was furious and pulled me aside before yelling at me for what I'd done. Apparently, they'd somehow managed to check out of the previous hotel by coordinating with their bank and paying them off somehow, but now they wanted me to answer them as to why exactly I'd abandoned them. I didn't think I owe them an explanation at all, but I still told her the exact reason that I'd left her and watched as her husband's face became more and more sour-looking. By the time I was done talking, he looked like he was ready to burst with anger at me, but I didn't care. It was his own fault that they had to suffer like this, and if he'd just been nice and polite to me, then I wouldn't have run away at all. So it was pointless to make faces at me to try and guilt-trip me. It was also pointless to lecture me about family values and morals, which is what my mother chose to do. She told me that what I'd done was unacceptable, and the way I'd chosen to deal with this situation was not only humiliating for them, but it was also a pathetic move on my part, because it made me look like a coward who was too afraid to talk to her own family. I was already pretty pissed off, and when she brought up the whole family thing yet again, I had a bit of an outburst and told her that we were not a family at all because, first of all, she had lied to us and hidden this so-called family of hers from us for a long time and had only deemed it important enough to let us know when she was about to get married. Not only that, but also she and her husband had never made an effort to make me feel like family at all, so it was really entitled of them to expect that I'd treat them as such. She should have just been glad that I offered to take them on vacation for her sake only, but if she was too blind and entitled to even appreciate that, then so be it. I didn't owe her anything either. Then I told her to her face that now I didn't want to see her anymore, and I wanted them to leave me alone for the rest of the vacation. She tried to demand that I book their flight tickets back home, but I refused since, like I already said, I'd done what I'd promised, but if they couldn't appreciate that, then I wasn't some fool who was going to go out of my way to help them. They were both adults. They had their own money, and if they were going to take me for granted, then they could kiss my offer goodbye. There was some more bickering after that, but then my stepdad had the good sense to intervene and took them all away, all the while shooting me the nastiest looks that he possibly could, as if I'd even care. A couple of hours have passed since then, and right now I'm on my way out for dinner with a friend of mine who lives here and reached out to me when she found out that I was visiting. Hopefully, my mom and her family will just go back home and let me enjoy the rest of this trip on my own because I really have no interest in continuing this unnecessary fight. Update 3. So, it turns out I was wrong about my mother letting go of this as easily as I thought she was going to. I thought that 2 days back I'd seen the last of her since we got into a really bad argument, and I pretty much told her that I didn't owe her anything. So I thought that she'd leave me alone, but clearly not. Today, right before I was about to leave and roam a little around the city on my own, I received a call from reception saying that my mother was back here to visit me again. This time it was just her, so I decided to go see her because I just wanted an end to this tiff so I could have fun on my vacation. I didn't have any idea what to expect when I went to speak to her in the lobby, but she looked more upset than angry, so I knew that at least today she wasn't going to be as awful as she was the previous time that she'd come over to meet me. She started off by apologizing to me for losing her temper and acting entitled because she apparently didn't even realize that she was acting that way. She also told me that she and her husband had been looking forward to a break from taking care of the household and the kids and the finances and everything all at once because they'd been having a very tense and rough patch before I invited her to accompany her on the vacation. And she thought that she could use this as an opportunity to build lasting bonds between all of us because she loved all of us equally and wanted us to be a part of each other's lives. However, she didn't know if that was the right way to go anymore because clearly I don't get along with her husband, and her husband doesn't seem to like me either. They got into a very nasty fight over what I'd done after they left the hotel the other day, and he accused her of raising me terribly and crossed a line when he told her that his ex-wife had been a better mother than she had been, which was saying something since his ex-wife would regularly abandon his kids by themselves at home for hours on end while she'd go out. That's the reason they got a divorce, because he finally found out what she'd been doing, and at the time they were too young to be left alone in a locked room by themselves, even if it was just for 3 or 4 hours. And for him to compare my mother to a woman like that all because I had decided to stand up for myself was taking things way too far. I don't think anyone would have tolerated that, but my mother says she loves him, so she's okay with that. The reason she visited me today, however, was to tell me that they were all flying back home the next day and said that she was sorry about her behavior. She'd been really stressed out regarding her relationship with her husband, which is why she'd already been on edge, and what I did just made it all worse. So she was apologetic for that, but she also told me that she wanted me to keep my distance for a while, which meant that I couldn't call her regularly to talk about life like I used to earlier. I didn't plan on calling her and talking to her while I was on vacation anyway, but to know that I wouldn't be able to have the same relationship with her ever again for the foreseeable future kind of stung, and all because of her husband. It sucked, but I told her I understood, and we had a really awkward, cold hug. If I'm being honest, I wish she just hadn't contacted me at all and hadn't bothered to apologize and stuff at all, because this just makes me feel worse about what happened. Like, I know she messed up, but she's still my mom, and she was my best friend while growing up. So losing her to this new family of hers actually did feel like I was losing the only part of my childhood that I still carried around with me. It hurts, but there's not much that I can do, and there's really nothing that I even want to do, given the circumstances. She's the one who wants to pick her husband and her stepkids over me, so really, what can I even do? I'll just try to enjoy the rest of my stay here because I'm paying a bomb to stay at this expensive hotel. So that's that. Update 4. Hi. So I came back home about 3 days ago, and I'm supposed to resume work tomorrow. I tried to make the best of my trip, and it was quite fun. I almost forgot about my situation with my mother until last night when I heard from my grandparents that she decided to leave her husband because they were going through a bad phase anyway, and they realized that they couldn't work things out anymore. So the family that she put me second to is now no longer hers, which is a little strange and sad to think about because she picked them over me, but she doesn't even have that anymore. We haven't spoken since she left me at the hotel that last day that she visited me, and I haven't tried to reach out to her either because it just seemed pointless. And after a while, I forgot about her because I was having fun on the trip. Even after coming back, I didn't think of her a couple of times, but she didn't talk to me, so I didn't try to talk to her either. I didn't want to force my presence someplace where I wasn't wanted, and she'd made it very clear that she didn't want to talk to me at the moment, and maybe she won't change her mind in the future either, from the looks of the situation now. I mean, she didn't even tell me that she decided to file for divorce, and that's pretty big. I think this is pretty much the end of the road for my mother and me, and hypothetically, even if we do reconcile someday, things will never be the way they used to be. I'm okay with that now because I was a good daughter to her, and I tried my best until I felt like I couldn't anymore. So I'm cool with whatever happens now, and I wish the best for her because I'm too old to hold grudges against anyone, let alone my own mom. I'll try to move past this as well now, I guess. Now on to the next story. Story 3. My wife's traumatic accident made her desperate for validation from another man who saved her and destroyed our marriage. I met my wife while we were in high school. She was the first girl I ever confessed my feelings to, and I was lucky enough to have them reciprocated. We were pretty much inseparable after this. I only wanted to go through my crappy high school days if she was there with me. Something about her, maybe it was her aura, made me feel so much more peace. I was there for her through her parents' divorce and her mother's untimely death. Her mother had cheated on her father after 27 years of marriage, and my wife believed the amount of remorse and guilt she felt is what caused her to pass away. The divorce and passing of his ex-wife just made my wife's dad even more certain there was a family curse. Despite this troubling time, our relationship and love for each other never faltered. We got married at the ages of 19 and 20. My wife's outlook on life wasn't the best all the time, but she understood that there were ups and downs and that life didn't owe us anything. Despite that, we were happy and capable of remaining strong for each other. We planned to wait at least 5 years before having children, but my wife became pregnant with our first child at the age of 22. She wasn't very happy and she blamed it on her nervousness to become a mother. I assured her that we could do anything together and that this was how family life was supposed to happen in marriage. The children are conceived, and the parents work through any obstacles life throws at them. My wife started to believe me and felt more hopeful and strong. Things were blissful up to and after the flawless birth of our daughter. That's when my wife's mind started to change. She didn't see herself in the same way she did before she had a baby. She never acknowledged how much value she put in her physical appearance. Once her belly was wrinkled then saggy, she had a hard time even leaving the house. She was a stay-at-home mom and always wanted me to do the errands when I was off work. Sometimes I was too exhausted and I genuinely needed her to go. Whenever this happened, she didn't fight me. She just went and got it done. Dates were non-existent. She wanted to stay at home because she didn't have anything to wear, or any number of extra excuses she had that all pertained to her appearance. I didn't mind dating at home, and we even had her father or my parents watch our daughter for us while we had some time alone. I always told her she was my woman for life and that I would always love her body unconditionally. That's all anyone can ask for, right? I knew she was my wife for life, and I never put any conditions on that, including her appearance. I told her I would spare some money for her to get clothes she liked to wear, but she didn't want to buy clothes at that size. I told her I would work out with her every day, but she always made an excuse as to why she couldn't. She started talking about the family curse her dad believed in. I told her that just wasn't logical and that she had to be the master of her fate to the best of her ability. My message went unheard until she was involved in a very bad car accident. A car pulled out in front of her, causing her to veer off the road and off an embankment. Her car wrapped around a tree and started smoking. When I got to the hospital, she was conscious enough to tell me that someone saved her life. She said a man climbed down seconds after her and pulled her up the steep wall to safety right before her car exploded. I could hardly believe it. I told her that after this she could say the curse was broken because she survived. She asked me to ask anyone in the hospital or police force if they knew who that man was. I tried to find out for her, but no one knew. After she was discharged, life at home was almost back to normal. I noticed she wasn't struggling with her self-esteem or overall doubt anymore. She told me she believed that the curse was broken because she survived. I was happy for her and this positive change. In hindsight, I did notice a few clues. I found a cigarette butt in our front yard. I asked my wife about it and she played dumb. She suggested it belonged to the lawn guy. My wife was spending more time on her phone, but doing it at times I wouldn't notice because of being at work, being in the bathroom, being in a different room than her when she was cooking dinner or when she was gardening. I never noticed enough to bring it up to her, and the biggest thought I had about it was that she was glad to be alive and was keeping in touch with her relatives and friends. Shortly after I came to this conclusion, I arrived home to find a strange car in the driveway. I could smell burgers and dogs in the backyard. When I got back there, I saw my wife talking to another man while he cooked on the grill. I asked them both what was going on, trying to be nice just in case this wasn't something I needed to be alarmed about. My wife smiled and introduced me to her hero, the man that saved her from the car. My stomach flipped. I didn't feel great about this. I never really wanted my wife to have male friends, especially not one that she felt indebted to. I didn't have any female friends because I refused to give temptation an opportunity. He was a good-looking man and taller than me by a few inches. No wedding ring. Through awkward chit-chat over dinner in the backyard, I found out he was a firefighter, and that before saving my wife he'd saved 3 dogs and 2 cats from burning buildings. My wife loved that. I felt nauseous. I called it a night and started cleaning up. My wife was disappointed but let him leave. She was exceptionally quiet for a few days after this. I tried to tell her I didn't want her to be friends with him because it was unnecessary and just opening the door to temptation. She said I needed to trust her to be a responsible married woman and that she would always keep their conversations PG. I told her I didn't like or want this. We dropped it for a few days until she sheepishly asked me if she could go out for a drink with him. I told her absolutely not. She was upset and said I was being controlling and that she could have her own friends without me being there. I told her that before all this happened she never went out anywhere, not even with me, so I asked her what made her suddenly want to go with this man. She didn't have an answer besides that he was a good friend and she did want to start going out more. I told her we could go out together and I'd ask her dad to babysit. She made a face. I knew at this point our marriage was in trouble. She didn't want to go out with me as much as her hero. I told her if she wasn't going out with me, she wasn't going out with him. I suggested she meet other stay-at-home moms so she could meet up with them and get out of the house. She jumped on this opportunity. The next day she texted me while I was at work telling me she found a group of moms that meet at the park every Wednesday to do yoga and let the kids play together. When she was supposed to be there, I left work to check. I found a group of moms doing yoga, so she could have been telling the truth, except my wife and daughter weren't with them. I went home and didn't see his car. I opened the front door quietly. I heard our daughter crying from her room upstairs and music coming from the finished basement. My heart started pounding as I got closer to the basement. I heard the unmistakable sounds of passion. My wife's voice mixed with another man's. I walked down the stairs, filming. My wife went all out for this. At least 50 tea candles were lit, with rose petals scattered all around. They were having sex on the pool table. As soon as my wife turned her head and saw me, she jumped up and started saying, "No," over and over again, realizing she was caught red-handed. She grabbed a blanket and told me I wasn't supposed to be here. He started frantically grabbing his clothes and telling me he didn't want any trouble. I told him he was a crap hero and he didn't deserve respect from anyone. He was in such a hurry to leave I didn't have to say anything else to him. I dialed her father as she freaked out, cried, and demanded to know who I was calling. The first thing I told him was that I just walked in on his daughter cheating on me. I put him on speaker while he said he was devastated and he never thought his daughter would do the same thing her mother did. Destroy the family and cause so much heartbreak. She turned furious and didn't want to hear it. She tried to grab the phone from me, hanging up on her father, but I ran upstairs with it and locked myself in her daughter's room, picking her up to stop her crying. My wife frantically knocked on the door, tried to open it, and told me to let her in a few times before she started wailing and begging me for my forgiveness. She called me her husband several times as if that was enough for me to forgive her. She admitted she wasn't thinking about me or our daughter or how much our marriage and family would be affected by her actions. I told her this was hopeless. She wanted me to trust her but now proved she was a liar and cheater. She told me she knew what she did was a mistake, but she didn't do it out of love for him. She did it because he made her feel better about herself. I told her she shouldn't have needed another man's or anyone's validation. I was her husband and the only man in her life for a reason. That's what marriage is. You don't rely on anyone but yourself and your spouse for meeting your emotional needs. I told her that emotions ultimately are not important and don't have to be an uncontrollable force of poor decision-making. She is supposed to make decisions based on what is best for her and her family, not fantasies or selfish desires. She didn't know what to say, so she just cried. When I finally opened the door and told her to leave, she lost her mind, screaming, telling me I couldn't just kick her out and separate her from our daughter. I told her I was going to file for divorce. She said until she was ordered to leave, she was going to continue living with me and our daughter, even if we slept in different rooms. And so we did that until our day in court. I showed the film of her cheating on me and got out of alimony payments. On top of that, her father's house didn't have enough rooms for our daughter to live, so I won custody. They got visitation, but they are both miserable and bitter to this day. My ex-wife has no one to blame but herself. She's completely lost her identity because of this. She has nothing to call her own and is too depressed to try to get a job or make friends. Now on to the next story. Story 4. Husband and sister slept together while I was giving birth and sent me a picture to rub it in. Now she's pregnant and begging me to forgive her because my ex-husband wants nothing to do with her. My sister, Susan, 32F, and I, 31F, have never gotten along, and our relationship has always been bad. Let's get that out of the way right now because I know my judgment is probably biased because of this. Since we were little, she's had this thing where she would constantly mimic or outdo me. Like back in school, she would jump into every club or sport I was into and aim to outshine me at it. Be it debate, chess, you name it. It seemed like if I could do something, she was determined to do it better. I had this special sport, something I had been into practically since birth. As I grew older, I dedicated a lot of time to practicing, and not to toot my own horn, but I became quite an expert in it, winning awards that reflected my skill. At the age of 14, my sister suddenly decided she wanted to compete in the same sport. Surprisingly, our parents allowed it. However, she did not have the same commitment to practice. Every chance she got, she would try to make fun of me during practice or try to downplay my skills. When the competition day arrived, it was clear to everyone that she wasn't as polished as many of the other kids. Despite this, she expected a big title. Unfortunately for her, I ended up winning the top title. My parents were very happy, but she threw a tantrum right there in front of everyone. She started to cry and scream, which caused quite an embarrassment for our parents, who had to promptly escort her out of the room. Later at home, my parents tried to gently talk to her and let her know that everyone has their own strengths and she didn't have to compete with me about everything. They told her that they were proud of her regardless of whether she won an award or not. But Susan began yelling at me in front of my parents and broke my award in anger. This really hurt me because, unlike her, I would work really hard to win these awards. My parents reprimanded her, but she didn't care. They made her go for therapy, but she would refuse to speak about her jealousy and resentment towards me. As we got older, she only got worse. Every day, getting ready for school was torture. She would make fun of my outfits or mock my hair, telling me how she was ashamed of how ugly I looked. For context, I've always been tall for my age and slender, with long red hair. I preferred wearing baggy clothes, unlike my sister who liked wearing skirts and crop tops. But I knew I was not ugly because I would get a lot of male attention, even at that age. My mother would chastise her for saying such mean things to me, so then Susan started to bully me at school, where she knew she could get away with it. She would rub it in my face that she had cooler friends than I did, which basically meant she hung out with the popular crowd, while I preferred to stick with people I genuinely enjoyed being around. I am an introvert by nature and was not loud like her. She would stand in the hallways with her friends, judging everyone, and if I passed along, she would loudly say how I was not her real sister and was probably adopted. During high school, I decided to create my own site on WordPress. I was just 15 and had no idea about how WordPress worked, but I loved writing and wanted to put my thoughts out there. Over time, I managed to amass 2,000 subscribers, and this is how a few local stores approached me to write and promote their products on my page. In the beginning, they would just send me a product, but as I started to gain more subscribers on my blog, I would earn money as well. My parents initially had no idea about this, but then they were surprised that I was earning from doing something that I genuinely enjoyed. My dad helped me open a bank account in my name, which had him as co-owner until I turned legal age so I could save this money for college. When my sister found out, she told me that I needed to share the money with her since it was unfair that I was earning money while she was not. I refused point blank and told her that she was welcome to try her hand at it. She tried to get my parents to back her, but they refused, so she decided to start her own blog as well. Initially, she claimed it was so easy to write and would mock me, saying this was not even a big deal. She had also told me she was a much better writer than me. However, when she got no increase in subscribers, she would get very frustrated and would ask me how it is that I got brand deals from my blog. She started to force me to promote her articles in my blog, telling me that we are sisters so we should share everything. But I refused to do so because, first of all, she had insulted my writing and was now coming for my help, and also because I didn't really like her writing. After a few months, seeing no result, she gave up on this dream. Next, when it came time for college, our mom went to an Ivy League school that we both aspired to go to. Susan applied to that school as well as a more prestigious Ivy League, but she was rejected. She had to enroll in a university in our city, which was also nice but not as nice as an Ivy League school. When it came time for me to apply for colleges, she would tell me that I should not even bother applying for Ivy League schools because if she didn't get in, then there was no way that I would get in. I would point out to her how my grades were excellent, which is what these schools required, but she would tell me that my personality was not fit to enroll in those schools. I didn't listen to her and applied to my mom's Ivy League school and, unfortunately, was accepted. When I got the email, I was afraid of telling her because I knew she would throw a big fit. My parents gently broke the news of my acceptance to Susan when she came over for dinner during a weekend. And as expected, Susan did not take it well. She refused to believe that I had been accepted, and when she saw my letter of acceptance, she started saying how this might be fake because, apparently, she was a much better student than me and she was rejected. My parents and I were getting really tired of her antics because I genuinely never saw her as my competition, while she would go above and beyond to F on my achievements. My dad tried to talk to her about how she could have congratulated me, and my mom urged her to go to a therapist again, but Susan got pissed. She angrily yelled at them about how she was their first child, so she was not the problem, and how she never wanted a sibling. Then she angrily walked out of the house in the middle of dinner. Ever since then, I made up my mind to keep my distance from her because I understood that we were getting older and she should be over this jealousy thing by now. College really changed me. I made new friends and hung out with them. The distance allowed me to focus on my own growth and development without the constant shadow of comparison. I pursued activities and formed connections based on my own preferences rather than in reaction to her attempts to one-up me. As the years in college unfolded, I discovered new passions and interests that were entirely my own, and I relished the freedom of being myself without the weight of constant competition. While I hoped my sister would find her own path and embrace her individuality, our relationship continued to be strained. When she could not compete with me academically anymore, she started to get competitive with our personal lives. She was always pretty passive-aggressive. When I got a boyfriend before she did, when my boyfriend, Finn, and I decided to move in together, she never missed a chance to make snide comments about it. Eventually, she found a guy called Tom who seemed perfect for her, and her mean comments started to mellow out. I could sense that she had this desire to get married first and be the first to have kids, but honestly, it didn't bother me much because I wasn't in any rush. Then, on Christmas, she announced that she was getting married in 2023, and I genuinely felt happy for her. I even congratulated her and her fiancé, and she hugged me for the first time after a long time. I thought we had finally taken a step towards mending our relationship. In the months following my sister's wedding announcement, life took an unexpected turn. We received a call from my boyfriend's younger brother, 24, who had just been told by his doctor that he was dealing with a very aggressive disease. The news was hard to fathom, and without hesitation, we rushed to his side to offer our support. My boyfriend was very close with his brother, and I could see how he was struggling to accept the news. My boyfriend and his brother had also lost their father at a very young age, so they knew how painful it was to lose a loved one. While we were staying with his family, my boyfriend popped the question to me one night, out of nowhere. I was surprised because, even though we had discussed getting married to each other, I didn't think he would do it at this time. My boyfriend told me how he was afraid that his brother may not live to see us get married, and because he loved me and wanted to spend the rest of his life with me, he didn't see any reason why we should delay it any longer. I understood his perspective completely and agreed because I loved him, and I also recognized the profound happiness it would bring his little brother and the rest of the family. We discussed it, and Finn and I both agreed that we were not the ones for extravagant weddings with a massive guest list. Instead, we wanted a simple celebration surrounded by our nearest and dearest, his family and his brother. His family and his brother were extremely happy when they learned of our engagement. I watched his little brother cry tears of joy and hug us. The only thing that nagged in the back of my head was my sister's wedding, which was also approaching. I didn't want her to become competitive again, and I thought we were too old now to even be this immature, so I decided to call her and have a talk with her first before I even informed my parents. I gave her a call, knowing she was aware of my boyfriend's brother's health situation, and shared the news about the proposal and explained that we planned to have a small wedding this year with just close family and friends, including her, my parents, grandparents, and a few friends. My intention was to ensure she could still have her big wedding as planned, and I was not overshadowing anything. I told her how much it meant to Finn's little brother that he could be a part of our celebration. However, Susan got upset. She immediately started accusing me of being jealous and suggested that I was using a dying person to rush into getting married first. She told me that this is why she has always hated me since I was born. I was hurt by her words and broke down. I was already having a difficult time processing Finn's brother's disease, and now my own sister refused to accept that this had nothing to do with her. I told her how she was the first person I had called in our family to share the news because I thought, for once, we could both be happy for each other. But alas, she was back to her old ways. Susan yelled through the phone that I was just a jealous snob and that she would never attend my wedding. She was so pissed that she even screamed that she wished my boyfriend had died instead of his brother, which would then have stopped me from getting married. I was really shaken up by how much hate she still had for me and started to doubt my decision. When I talked with my parents, they assured me that I was not doing anything wrong and that they were happy for both of their daughters. They told me that, regardless of Susan, they would be flying down to attend my wedding. I was grateful that my parents understood my intentions and didn't blame me like Susan. We had the wedding the next day, and it was small and intimate just like Finn and I wanted. We took pictures with his brother, and everyone was so happy for us. When I uploaded some of my wedding pictures on social media, I received a call from Susan. I thought she was calling to maybe apologize or congratulate me, but instead, she started to say how I had to delete my pictures from social media because she didn't want our friends and family to find out I had gotten married before her. She told me once she was married, I was allowed to post my wedding pictures. I refused and put my foot down and told her how ridiculous it was for her to ask me to hide my wedding. I told her she could hate me as much as she wanted, but I was done with trying to make things right with her. She called me insufferable and uninvited me from her wedding. I told her that I was fine with it and asked her to just leave me alone. Finn and I were happy in our marriage. He had a high-pressure job and was not allowed to take any more leave, so we had to fly back home after the wedding. He had always been an incredibly attentive boyfriend, and that quality seamlessly transitioned into our married life. As a husband, he remained devoted and considerate, making sure our relationship remained a priority despite the demands of his career. A few months later, Susan got married to Tom as planned, even though I didn't go to her wedding because she had uninvited me. I did send her a huge bouquet of flowers and a note congratulating her. I saw all her wedding pictures and was really happy for her. However, just a few weeks after their marriage, my mother called to tell me how Susan had been cheating on Tom with one of her coworkers, and he had just found out. This was a huge scandal, and everyone blamed Susan, who tried to defend herself by saying she wanted an open marriage, but Tom refused her. In the end, Tom applied for an annulment of their marriage as he refused to stay with her. We felt sad for the poor guy as he seemed to be genuinely in love with Susan. As if this wasn't bad news enough for our family, Finn's brother also passed away during this time. My husband and I rushed to be there for his funeral rites, and he was a complete wreck throughout everything. I don't know why, but something inside my husband just broke, and Finn was never the same after that. He was not attentive or loving anymore. He would get angry very quickly for small things and start raging on everyone. I pushed him to go for grief counseling, but this behavior continued. He stopped going to the office and eventually he was kicked out. He would sit in his pajamas the whole day just playing video games or watching sports. I was a paramedic who worked 12-hour shifts and was the only earning adult during this time. I would try my best to talk to my husband, but he would never take me seriously. No amount of counseling or therapy seemed to help because he refused to help himself. I started noticing that something was off when he would constantly start to hide his phone around me. This had never been the case before, so I became suspicious. He would consistently ask me when I was coming back from work and urge me to stay out late. He would not spend any time with me or even ask me little things like how my day was going. He would constantly be spending money, either going out or buying himself gifts. During this time, I found out that I was 3 months pregnant. I had not been getting periods, but I assumed it was due to work stress. Never in a billion years did I imagine that I would be pregnant. When I told Finn that I was pregnant, he seemed neutral. I told him straight away that if he didn't want to be a father, he was welcome to walk away from our marriage. He assured me that he was happy for us. Throughout my entire pregnancy, I dealt with severe sickness, and honestly, it may have led me to unintentionally neglect my husband even more as I was distracted by my body issues. Being sick had taken a toll on every aspect of my life. I hadn't been able to work for 4 months and stopped going out to meet my friends. I was diagnosed with hyperemesis gravidarum, and the effects had been pretty unbearable. That pregnancy had been far from easy, and my parents had even stepped in to help with household chores since I was too unwell to do anything. Throughout all this, Finn had managed to get a job, and he was supporting both of us. I had assured him that after my pregnancy I would join back the workforce as I didn't like staying at home anyway. We would sometimes fight when Finn would come back home after work, as he would call me lazy or dramatic for not doing anything around the house, even though I would be in pain. On the day my water broke, I called Finn 12 times, but he did not pick up my call even once. I sent him a text saying I was about to have the baby and he should meet me in the hospital. I asked my parents to drive me to the hospital, and they readily agreed. As I am in the hospital bed, writhing in pain while waiting to give birth, I receive a notification on my phone. My mother, who was in the delivery room with me and holding my hand, checked the phone because we assumed it might be Finn. Her eyes widen in shock as she reads the message. I ask her what it is, and she refuses to tell me. I asked her again as I started getting bad thoughts in my head and pleaded with her to tell me. She handed me my phone, looking extremely sad. As I opened my messages, I found a picture of my sister with Finn lying together in bed, and Susan had sent a message to me saying, "Good luck being a single mother because I have taken your husband." I was speechless reading the message. I could not believe my eyes and called Finn. He picked up the call after the 4th ring and casually asked me why I was calling him. I started shouting and asked him what the hell he was doing with my sister, and he simply lied, that he had fallen in love with Susan. He explained how she supported him through his bad times when she reached out to him after his brother's death, and they had been talking to each other for a while. Apparently, one thing led to another, and they had been having an affair behind my back for months now. He told me that he wanted to hide the affair until I had given birth, but Susan didn't want to keep up the lies anymore. Clearly, I knew that Susan had knowingly waited until this very moment to make this news even more painful to me. He started to apologize, but I cut him off and told him that I didn't care about his apologies and I would see him in court. Cheating was a big no for me, and even though my heart was broken into a million pieces, the love of my life and the father of my child decided to backstab me by sleeping with my sister. I would not let this break me down. I cried throughout my delivery from the heartbreak and pain. Thankfully, despite this, my daughter, Aurora, was born healthy and thriving. My mother cried in tears of joy, and later my dad would not stop staring at my baby and congratulating me. All my family members and friends came to visit me to show their support. I made sure everyone knew that Susan had slept with my husband and sent me that picture. My parents called Susan and told her that they were done with her and that what she had done was unforgivable. They told her that she should never call them her parents because they were ashamed of giving birth to her. Susan tried to protest and say how Finn and her were in love, but my dad assured her that she was off their will. We blocked her from our lives as well as our phones. Some of my cousins and relatives did send her nasty messages, and I did nothing to refrain from them. What she had done needed to be called out. I also informed Finn's mother about what her son had done, and she was shocked. She did try to talk to Finn, but it was all too late. I was going to divorce his sorry ass, and no one was going to stop me. I moved out all my things, and my parents helped me shift it to their house. Finn did try to confront me and tell me how he had been thinking, and, after talking to his mother, he realized that he had made a huge mistake, but I didn't even spare him a glance. I refused to let him see our daughter until we cleared it with court, as I didn't trust him around our child. What he and Susan had done was unhinged, so I didn't want Aurora to be exposed to all that. While I lived with my parents, I met with a good lawyer and filed for divorce. During the divorce proceedings, Finn fought hard to refuse alimony, but because he had cheated on me during the marriage while I was still pregnant, the judge refused to let him get away with it. For custody, I got primary custody, and he was allowed to see our daughter only with supervision. My lawyer did a great job in showing evidence of how Finn had suffered from depression and aggressive behavior after his brother had passed away. which was potentially a red flag. It's been 8 months now since my divorce from Finn. He regularly sends child support, but other than that, he hardly comes to visit our daughter. He has tried talking and apologizing to me a few times, but I pay no heed to him. I have gone back to my work because I need to provide for my child, while my mother babysits Aurora. Then, after I come home from work, I take over. Aurora is the only reason I have been able to keep my head up and keep my life moving. Yesterday, out of nowhere, I received a call from an unknown number. When I picked up, I heard Susan on the other line. I froze in shock as I had blocked her from my contact list months before. Susan begged me not to cut the call and started to tell me how she had been trying to get in touch with me for months and finally decided to call me from her friend's phone. I told her firmly that I had nothing to talk to her about and asked her to not call me again. However, she immediately rushed to say how Aurora was going to have a brother very soon. A mix of shock, disbelief, and a tinge of anger swept over me. I asked her for an explanation, and she told me how she was pregnant with Finn's child. She continued to say how I should forgive her now for the sake of her child as she was going to be a mother and how we should move past our differences. I firmly reiterated to Susan that I did not care if she was pregnant or not because I wanted nothing to do with her. Hearing this, Susan started to scream about how, because of me, our parents and the rest of the family had stopped talking to her and did not even return her calls. She said how Finn refused to accept her pregnancy and was pressuring her to abort and how she had no one to help her during such a difficult time. I laughed hearing her pleas and reminded her how she had decided to sleep with my husband while I was pregnant the entire time and how she sent me that inappropriate picture during my childbirth. I told her that she had made her bed and now she should lie in it and happily told her to enjoy being a single mother without any support system. Since our call, I have talked to my friends about my sister, and I have received mixed reactions from everyone. While some of my friends think I'm doing the right thing, there are a few who think I'm being too cruel, especially because I know firsthand how difficult it is to be alone during a pregnancy. So here I am on Reddit to get an unbiased opinion. Am I wrong for refusing to forgive my sister after she slept with my ex-husband and destroyed my life? Update 1. Okay, guys, I have received a lot of comments and it has given me a lot to think about. I would like to clarify that I blame my husband as much as I blame my sister for what they did to me. The reason it hurt me more that Susan did this to me is because she has always competed with me all her life. I have never understood why. All I ever wanted was a big sister to look up to, yet I got a sister who was a bully. I will never forgive her, no matter what anyone says. However, I will talk to my parents and make it clear that they are welcome to have a relationship with Susan and her son if they want to do so. Update 2. It's been 3 months since my last update, and people have been hounding me to give an update. Sorry, I've been busy with work and childcare. By the way, Aurora is doing just fine. For some of you who have asked me about her, she is an adorable child, and I keep falling in love with her every day. Finn doesn't really visit her, and I honestly don't mind. When Aurora grows up, I can have this conversation with her, and until then, she is happy being taken care of by me and my parents. Now, coming on to the main update, I did have a talk with my parents and let them know that Susan was pregnant. They were shocked just like me. I told them how it was Finn's child and he wanted nothing to do with her. Apparently, my mother started to cry, and I felt emotional seeing my parents in distress. I could see how much my parents were disappointed in my sister. My dad finally called up Finn to have a man-to-man conversation. Finn spilled the truth. He told us how, after our divorce, he had stopped seeing Susan since she lost interest in him and dropped him. She started going out with multiple men, and he was really hurt, so he stopped pursuing her. Then, a few weeks later, she contacted him and told him about her pregnancy. Finn told her that since they were not married and had no plans of getting back together, she could potentially decide not to go through with the pregnancy. However, Susan told Finn how she wanted to be a mother just like me and that he should prepare himself. Finn pleaded with her to think this through since pregnancy and childcare are not easy, but Susan apparently told him that if I could do it with Aurora, then she could do it also with her son. Finn told my dad that he was ready to pay child support but wanted no relationship with the child. Since this conversation, my parents have realized that Susan hasn't changed at all. She is clearly having this baby to somehow compete with me yet again. Honestly, It is exhausting, and I don't want Aurora to grow up like I did, so I want to keep myself and my daughter away from all this. I told my parents that they were welcome to talk to Susan and have a relationship with her if they wanted, but they seemed reluctant. I have also started looking for houses so I can move out of my parents' place with Aurora. Update 3. Hi, my fellow Redditors. I am updating this after 5 months. I am thankful to everyone who has been keeping up with my posts and sending me sound advice. I did move out of my parents' place as I had updated earlier, and currently, Aurora and I are living on our own. I have hired a babysitter who takes care of my daughter while I am at work. It feels good to finally have my own space. Being a single parent is hard, but I am managing every day. Susan gave birth to her son, and my mother was the only one who went to meet her while my dad refused. My mother has told Susan how disappointed everyone is with her for what she has done, and that the only reason she even came to see her was because of the child. Susan did beg for forgiveness, but my mother told her that our relationship with her was done. I am sure it must hurt my mother to cut off her daughter, but Susan has done things that make it hard for everyone to forget. My dad wants nothing to do with her and has stayed true to his words. Meanwhile, my parents continue to support me and Aurora however they can. They regularly visit us during the weekend. Finn continues to pay child support, not only to me for Aurora but now also for Susan's child. I can't begin to write how embarrassing this is. I have spent many nights crying into my pillow alone because I still struggle with this betrayal. This is why I have been going for therapy, and I understand that healing myself will take some time. Now on to the next story. Story 5. I found out my fiancé is having an affair a month before our wedding. She tried to justify it when I caught her. Let me start from the beginning here. Yesterday, I met my fiancé at our wedding venue for our 4-month-out meeting to finalize details. We drove to the venue separately because she was leaving straight from work. Towards the end of the meeting, she let me know her friend was dropping off her rental car and needed a ride home and asked if it would be okay. I said yes, thinking nothing of it as it wasn't that far from our home and I know her friend well. I get home and tried to get in touch with her for the next 3 hours. No answer. At approximately the 1:30 mark, I texted her friend and asked if she had made it to her okay. I was very worried. My fiancé ends up coming home and says sorry it took longer than expected. She hung out with her friend for a bit before leaving. Okay, no biggie. Just let me know next time, please. Her friend gets back to me a few minutes later and says, sorry, I couldn't make it to the venue. Didn't see your fiancé tonight. I asked her why she would say this, and she said she didn't know. She can't control what her friend says and walked outside. I'm sketched out AF by this point. I have never done this, but I looked at her phone records. Yes, I did and don't regret it. I saw that when she went outside she called her friend that had texted me right after she went outside. I also saw an hour-long call with a number I didn't know. On the way to the venue, I asked her what rental place they went to and multiple other questions. She had quick answers and they seemed legit. I thought maybe I'm crazy here. I need to chill and sleep on it. This morning, I asked her to please see the text from her friend asking her to pick her up, and I would apologize for questioning her the previous night. She said no. I said, when I caught up to you yesterday on the way to the venue, I saw you were on the phone. Who was that? She said, oh, that's the friend I picked up later on. That's when I knew for a fact she was lying. I said I looked at her phone records and knew that wasn't true. She then changed her story to say, oh, I needed to meet up with a coworker to discuss a patient. Who is the coworker, and why couldn't you discuss that over the phone? I need to show him the techniques in person. His name is Michael. Okay, I am sketched out beyond belief at this point. We never lie to each other. I asked to see the text with Michael. She said she wouldn't let me see them. I said, why not if there's nothing to hide? Are you having an affair? Do you not want to be together anymore? She pauses and proceeds to tell me all the things that are wrong with me. I work too much. I don't spend enough time with her. I don't listen. I'm astonished at this point. All of this is news to me. I put 2 and 2 together at this point. I know something sketchy is going on. I again asked to see the texts. It took about a half hour of convincing to see these texts, and they were crazy sexual in nature and talking a lot of shit about me, also how she wanted to be with him and how they're essentially in love. She started this job 1.5 months ago. He is her coworker. He is also 15 to 20 years older and divorced with multiple kids. I've been financially supporting her for the last few months as she got back on her feet and was working extra, so she wouldn't have to pick up a part-time job. We own a house which we both live in with 3 dogs and a horse. Sorry for the novel. I am beside myself right now. I did not see this coming, and we were going to get married in 4 months. Any advice would help. Update 1. As an update, I was finally able to sit down with her tonight and go over this again. She came in trying to blame me for what she did, trying to justify the cheating and lying as a direct result of my lack of communication and listening. She said she wouldn't have had to start talking to this guy if I had been listening better. I spent too much time in the office working and don't dedicate enough time to her. I tried to explain that I was putting in extra hours to try and support her and the family financially while she was struggling, so she wouldn't have to get a part-time job. She said she would have rather gotten a part-time job, which makes no sense to me. She was under the impression that because this was short-lived, 1 week, she says, and they only made out once, that we could move past this. When I brought up the text where she was trashing me and talking sexually with him, she deflected hard, and I got nowhere with that. I told her that I'm not the reason that this is happening. She went too far and should have communicated with me or thought about the implications first. That I can never trust her again, and this is all because of her actions. Whether she wants to try and justify this is my fault is up to her. At the end of this part, it got a bit calmer. I said, listen, we just really need to figure out the house we own jointly and the 3 dogs. We came to the conclusion that either I stay and buy her out or we sell and get new places. The dogs. One of us will get one, the other 2 TBD. So that's where this left off tonight, and we continue to keep you all posted on progress. Curious what you all would do about the house. Financially, I can support it alone, but it is nearly 3,000 sq ft and 5 acres of land which was bought solely to have her horse. She is taking the horse when she leaves and boarding it at a barn. Update 2, Day 3. I was able to sit and have a 3-hour conversation with her tonight. We talked about our relationship and what led to what occurred. It started with her telling me what I did wrong in our relationship. Lack of communication, spending too much time working and on my phone. I don't disagree with any of these things. My mindset behind working so much was support of the family. I run an e-commerce business on the side, and I'm a one-man customer service center, and deals happen 24 hours a day. I am never not on the clock. I could have certainly been better about setting my phone aside and responding to people the next day. The lack of communication was on both ends, and a prime example of this is the fact that I was unaware she was unhappy with any of this. It was never communicated to me. She said she felt I would have gotten upset if she told me but never gave me the chance to work on it. I am not a perfect person by any means, and many times I do or say things that are misinterpreted by her as rude. An example of this is a week or 2 ago I was trying to help her with a budget with her financial problems to try to set up a plan to get her on track. To note, I work in the financial industry and do this for clients all the time. She had mentioned that she owed me maybe $1,000 and she would get that back to me next paycheck. I said something like, I think it's a little bit more than that. Let's go through the transfers I've made to our joint account. It ended up being over $55,000. My purpose for doing this was not to make her feel bad, but to realize how much I have been contributing. She took this as me trying to humiliate her. I was just trying to help, and maybe my timing was off. She told me I have been too focused on money lately, but I was only trying to make sure we were going to be okay. We still had quite a bit to pay for the wedding, and my budgeting mentality was on overload trying to make sure we had enough. The fact that she keeps trying to justify what she did by attributing it as a direct correlation to my flaws really bothers me. She keeps telling me that she is surprised I would throw away 7 years of a relationship away like this. I keep having to remind her that I didn't throw it away. She did with her actions. She told me that I told too many people too quickly and we could have resolved all of this between us. She also said that she wouldn't have had to talk to someone else if I was a better listener and communicator. I have finally determined the extent of the affair, which I actually believe based on the text that I read. They began talking 1 to 2 weeks before via text. I don't know if they had met up before outside of work, but this time around he had asked her to the park to play basketball and talk. She met up with him and they ended up making out. I truly believe it didn't go further than this yet, but it would have in the near future, I am sure. She says he is not her boyfriend. She also took off tonight and I have no idea where she is at, assuming with him or a girlfriend. It is an awkward living situation, but I am hoping this resolves in the near term. I do think she wants me to get back with her and try to repair that. I think that the main issue was a lack of communication that manifested for a long time. We got into a routine, lived our boring simple life, and meanwhile this problem was never discussed and grew over time. She acted out instead of talking to me and also lied to my face / talked a lot of shit about me behind my back. She can be very sneaky, and I don't think I can fully trust her again. Obviously, this would be the easiest thing to do, but I don't think I would ever be truly happy. Understanding the root cause has helped me feel better. If nothing else, it will allow me to address my personality flaws / communication issues and see things from another perspective. I started hitting the gym today and will keep a routine going. I also plan on picking back up on studying for my CFP designation. I took the week off of work to focus on my mental health. Today I called the wedding venue and officially canceled the date. We were able to get some money back but lost a bit unless the date can be resold to another couple. Unlikely. I also spoke with her parents again to keep them apprised. They live far away and I am sure are worried sick. I continue to let them know everything is fine and calm, and they don't need to worry about their daughter. I did some research, and with interest rates where they are today, I will not be able to find a comparable house for the mortgage I pay. I can barely find an apartment for less nowadays. I think my best option is to try and buy out her share and have her find an apartment. She seems agreeable at this time. We will have an appraiser out to assess value and see what half of the equity would be and if that is doable for me. My questions you all are, does this change your mind at all about the situation? Am I handling this properly? If not, what should I be doing different? Update 3. It's been nearly a month since this whole situation went down, and I owe you all an update. It has been a very busy, emotional, and eventful month, so I am not going to lie. The few days after this happened to me, I was a pathetic mess, grueling to get back with this cheating bitch. It's embarrassing to admit, but it happened, and it was all part of the process of moving on. While in this vulnerable state, I tried everything I could to do things right, make things better, but nothing worked. I was actually told that she had to make a decision, me or him, and she did the right thing, choosing him. I think that's when I woke up and realized I had let my self-worth go down the drain and I needed to take a step back and really focus on me and what was best for me. It is hard after 7 years of doing everything for someone else to focus on your own needs, but that's exactly what I have been doing since. I moved our joint savings accounts to my individual checking account. I did the math of what was owed to me and transferred half of the balance back to the joint account for her to take. I've been working out every day since this happened. It makes me feel good to not only improve how I look, but helps me continue to think clearly. I've gone suit shopping for a massage, out with friends and family. Not only was this relationship isolating of my friends and family, which should have been a huge red flag, but I never did anything for myself. Buying clothes is just not something I would do. I was always worried about providing for my significant other and animals. I've been seeing a therapist for the first time in my life on a weekly basis. It helps me talk things out in my decision-making. It is something I will probably continue to do after this situation resolves, just to continue to improve myself. Now for the bigger items. I am still living in the house with the ex. She is sleeping in the guest bedroom, and we are at a point where the only communication is, "Did you feed the dogs?" I think she is a terrible person, and no matter what I say, in her mind this is my fault. To accuse someone of being a bad communicator and then using that as an excuse to then not communicate her feelings to me and cheat, that's her being a hypocrite and an easy out in her delusional mind. I stopped bothering trying to reason with her because she is unreasonable. I have been keeping the ball rolling with listing the house for sale. I contacted an agent, had them come, and was happy with the proposed sale price. She then requests that I contact 2 other agents and get their opinions, one of which was recommended by her friend. Yes, I made all the calls, set up all the appointments, and met with these people. This is how the relationship always was, and even though it's not fair, I've been willing to do it all to get the hell out of here. After meeting with all 3, we ended up going with the first agent. Pictures were taken on Sunday, and the house was listed for sale Sunday night. Open house next Saturday, already getting a lot of attention on the resites. She will be taking the horse to a barn somewhere TBD. I had a conversation about the dogs and offered to take one or none. She said she would take all three of them to keep them together. They are a happy bunch, and I don't want to fight over taking one if that will break them up. It also selfishly allows me to pursue a clean start. Unexpectedly, I met someone about a week ago that I've been spending quite a bit of time with. I have no false expectations here, but I'm enjoying hanging out with her. She's been through a similar situation in the past and has been helping me through this. It's really eye-opening speaking with a kind, thoughtful, and independent woman. It makes me realize what a narcissist my ex was. Completely self-centered, dependent, and manipulative. I should have listened to the warnings from family and friends long ago. I definitely fell into the trap of being in a simple routine. I wasn't enjoying life. It was just an easy situation to be in. Nice house, lots of land, great animals. Didn't want to rock the boat, so I just continued on. You don't really realize this until you take a step back and truly reflect. Some might say it was wasted time, but I am really using this as a learning experience. I will not ignore red flags in the future. I will not fall into the simp trap. I will continue to maintain relationships with friends and family. I just want to end this with a huge shout out to everyone on here that commented on my original post. I posted on Reddit because I had no idea what to do. Those of you that took the time to try and help a complete stranger on Reddit are amazing. I read every single comment, and they all helped me get to where I am now. I am looking forward to the next chapter in my life, wherever it takes me. Thank you all truly. Now on to the next story. Story 6. Spoiled brother keeps insisting on proposing to his girlfriend at my wedding. He has a whole plan to hijack our big day, but I told his GF and she dumped him before he gets the chance. I am 27M and have my wedding planned for this October. While my wedding preparation is on the rocks, there's someone who's busy making plans to ruin it. He is none other than my elder brother, Rick, 33M. He has been planning to propose to his girlfriend on my wedding day. That's right. Before I delve into the further details, do you think it is even fair to steal our day and propose to his girlfriend? More than my brother, it is about my family. We live in a small town where everyone knows most of them. Our grandparents also live in close vicinity. It would be true if I say that most of our extended family and relatives are put up within a circumference of 5 miles. We have a traditional household where you have to respect your elders just because they were born before you. My brother is older than me, and he takes his age to be an entitlement to get away with his stuff. We have a family tradition of having a weekly dinner together at our parents' place if we are in town. Last week, during this weekly dinner, my brother dropped this bombshell. He said he's planning on proposing to his girlfriend at my wedding, so I should keep a slot for him between the events and preferably before the exchange of vows. He said it so normally that for a moment I thought he was kidding to piss me off. I said, if this was supposed to be a joke, then you got me. I'm pissed. He said it was no joke and he was damn serious about his plan. I said, excuse me, it's my wedding, not a birthday, which comes everywhere, and you can use the occasion to make it yours. How could you even think I would let you go ahead with your plan? He said, why not? It's a perfect opportunity. Everyone would be present there, and it would be so good to propose to Mia, his girlfriend, in front of everyone. The photographer would capture her reaction from all angles. How beautiful memories it is going to create. I was dumbfounded at his stupidity. I said, do you realize that you're going to steal our moment? Wedding day is supposed to be for the bride and the groom. They should be at the center stage, and no one, absolutely no one, should get any footage except them. He said, of course, it would be your day. I would just take 10 minutes of that day to propose to Mia. That is it. It is such a small thing. It shouldn't bother you. Why are you making such a big deal about it? I needed someone to back me up, so I looked at my parents to knock some sense into their 33-years-old man-child. But my parents curled up their arms and said it was between us to settle, and they were not going to get involved in our matters. It got me pissed off even more. I mean, when there's a situation where my brother needs something from me, they would run to advocate his case. But when I reach out to them for help, they say they're neutral and want to stay away from siblings matters. I said, cool, then I'll deal with it in my way. Don't come with a moral compass at that time. I stood up from the table and affirmed with a straight face that I'm not going to let Rick propose at my wedding. I came home and told my fiancée about Rick's demand, and she got absolutely pissed off. She said there's no way we should allow Rick to do that. You know, women are way more particular about their wedding day than men. She said if required, she would speak to Rick and talk him out of this idea. I said it's not required as of now. I have denied his request, and it should be fine for now. This could have ended here, but yesterday Rick asked for the wedding itinerary with the schedule. I asked him why would he need that. He said he wanted to review the preparation if everything had been planned properly. I said my fiancée is planning everything by herself, and we can completely fall back on her. Now the thing is, I don't know if he's still harboring the idea of proposing to his GF at my wedding or if he's genuinely asking about the wedding schedule in goodwill. I don't want to start the topic again because that might reignite the thoughts in his head. Edit. There's one more problem here. Rick's girlfriend, Mia, is my college buddy. Mia, I, and my fiancé are close college friends. Rick met Mia at our engagement and hit it off. The thing is, Mia is not serious about Rick. She is into him but has not thought about long-term with him. It is natural for her to be apprehensive about him since they have been dating for merely 7 months. Besides, she has a dream of working as an investment banker, and she's planning to pursue masters by next fall. She has no plans of settling down in the near future. For some reason, she wants to move to London. She has this thing for British culture. I'm sure she would have discussed her plan with Rick. I don't know why he still wants to embarrass himself and Mia in front of everyone. Until now, I was just worried of Rick seizing our day to propose to Mia. Now I am terrified that if he does, Mia might turn him down in front of everyone. My wedding would transform into his breakup day and would ruin everyone's mood. Me and my fiancé are at a fix on whether we should inform Mia about Rick's proposal. I know it's not the right thing to do. It's their matter and we should stay away from it, but do you see the complexities here? My fiancé thinks we should inform Mia so that she can handle the situation in her way. Maybe become transparent to Rick or give him a hint that she is not looking forward to settling down. But I'm worried that if Rick gets to know that we have ruined his surprise, he will howl and throw tantrums like a 5-year-old. I really don't know what to do now. Update 1. Rick saved me $1. He dug his own grave. 2 days back, Mia called me in panic asking if Rick had any plans of proposing to her. I was struck. I asked her why she was asking this. She said Rick has been asking for a ring she has been wearing. When Mia asked him why he was asking for the ring, he didn't give any straight answer. She freaked out when one of her rings went missing from her jewelry drawer. I was like, "You mean Rick stole your ring?" She yelled, "He stole my ring to make another one with the same measurement. Why else would he steal my ring? I'm guessing your brother is not a thief, is he?" I acted dumb and asked her, "You think he's going to propose to you with a new ring?" She said, "Duh, you Doomba dollar." She was so mad at this point that if I told her I knew, she was going to kill me. So I remained quiet and asked her what she was going to do next. She said she was going to break up with him. I requested her, for Jesus' sake, hold your thoughts until my wedding. I don't want a drunken Romeo raising a toast to me and talking about his breakup. We both burst out in laughter. I calmed her nerves and asked her to tell Romeo, Rick, about her future plans and that she did not want to get married anytime soon. To talk about Rick, indeed, he is a Romeo in love. Every time he dates a woman, he claims her to be the perfect wife for him, but sadly none of the women reciprocated his feelings and dumped him whenever he hinted at long-term plans with them. The same is going to happen this time with Mia. I do feel bad for him, but he brings this to himself. He is 33, but none of his relationships has ever lasted for more than a year, and it is always him that gets dumped. So circumstantially, it has to be him, duh. And why would it not be? He freaks out a girl like the way he's doing with Mia. They have been together for only 7 months, and he's running behind her with a proposal ring. He had done the same with every woman he had dated. Some of them left as soon as they got the hint of his seriousness, and 2 of them even turned him down while he was on his knees with a ring. The entire family had to bear his crying and wailings for months after that. He sounds like a 5 years old, right? Yeah, because he is. He is the firstborn child of our family, not only for our parents but for the entire family. My father is the second child of my grandparents, but my uncle, father's elder brother, could not conceive a child due to some medical reasons. Even for my brother, my parents had to try for many years before having him, so he was regarded as some sort of miracle child. He was pampered to the core. I have 2 aunts as well, but none of them have a child either. I don't know their reason though, so Rick was the only child in the entire family until I showed up after 6 years, but he was still the star of the house while I just existed. My parents tried to treat us evenly, but they never succeeded. It was understandable since he was their first child after so much of struggle. I was unplanned. No one even wanted me or expected me. Everyone was happy to have Rick. It goes without saying how this kind of treatment shapes a child. I won't say he was evil. He tried to be a good brother, but he is an entitled one. He has this thing that he's the elder one, and the world should revolve around him. Our family has made him so. He's grown physically but mentally too far from his age. He's emotionally needy. Otherwise, who else proposes to a girl within 7 months of dating, and that too without giving a hint? His overeagerness to propose is one reason for the rejection. The other reason is that he's useless and dumb. He's still a mama's boy who rushes to mama to talk about his day and whine about his life. He has got no social life, no real friends, because they don't pamper him the way he gets pampered at home, so he thinks no friend is good enough for him. He's 33, yet he doesn't have a stable job. He hops from one to another. Same reason. His butt is not buttered by his boss like it is done by the family members. He fails to understand that the outside world doesn't feed you with a golden spoon unless you are worth it. I'm not sure how things are going to take a turn from here, but you can definitely count on me for updates. Update 2. I tell you, this man-child hasn't grown up a bit. I thought he had given up on the idea of proposing to Mia at my wedding, but dude, he hasn't. He is still game with his plan. Yesterday, during family dinner, I asked him when he was planning to propose. His reply blew my mind. As how could anyone be so dumb? He said, I'm actually confused between 2 slots. One could be as soon as Andrea, my fiancée, enters the hallway to walk down the aisle, and Mia would be standing on the way with flower petals in her hand to shout on Andrea. I could just kneel and propose. Mia would have no idea she's getting a proposal while she watches her friend walk down the aisle. The second option is when I raise a toast to you. I conclude my speech by going down on my knees and proposing to Mia. Even in this situation, she could not imagine a proposal coming her way at the end of the speech. Okay, which one do you think is better? I screamed out, none. How meticulously he has planned to ruin my day. How stupid it would be for me and Andrea. Just imagine this. Andrea walking down the aisle in her bridal dress, and I adore her with teary eyes. And in the middle of this, my loser brother goes down on his knees and proposes to his girlfriend. How ridiculous. How did he even think I would allow this to happen? I said, I'm not going to let you ruin our day. If you are so keen on having a magical moment of proposal, organize your own event, hire your own photographer to seize the moment and treasure it, or do whatever you want to do with that. When he first laid out this idea of proposing, I was angry, but now I'm angry and concerned both because I know what's going to happen. Mia is very clear about her stand that she's going to turn him down even if he proposes in front of thousands of people at a stadium. The Mia I know won't hesitate to say no and throw the ring at his face and won't care about the guests present at the wedding. I took a deep breath and asked him if he had already got the ring. Guess what? Mom got excited at this, and she rushed to bring the ring to show it to me. I asked him how did he know it would fit Mia. He said he took one of the rings from her drawer to use it as a measurement. I said, you mean you stole her ring from her drawer? He brushed off my question and asked, do you think I should get a suit similar to you to wear for your wedding? I flipped out and said, why don't you marry at my wedding venue and get done with it? I can do it another time. Why are you so adamant about proposing to Mia at my wedding? Why not before or after? He said, I already gave you enough reasons. 1, everyone would be present. 2, the photographers. 3, I'm the elder one. It would be so awkward that I remain single while you get married, so let the people know that I'm not single. I also have a girlfriend and would get married soon. I screamed that it was all about your ego of being the elder one. You cannot see your younger brother getting married before you, and that's why you want to ruin my wedding and make it all about yourself. My parents really realized that my anger had blown up. They tried to calm me down, but I said clearly that if Rick didn't drop the idea of proposing at my wedding, then he would be uninvited. Mom flipped out and said it better be a false threat because if it's real and I uninvite Rick, then she is also going to boycott my wedding. I was lost for words. Really, Mom? When Rick was planning to seize my wedding day, you guys said you didn't want to take sides and remain silent spectators. Now when I'm retaliating, you're threatening me of boycotting my wedding. I stormed out of their house saying, "Cool. I don't care even if none of you show up at my wedding. But I'm not going to let this pampered man-child ruin my big day." I came home red-faced. When I told Andrea about the matter, she burst out in laughter at Rick's immaturity. She said, "Why do you want to fight with them face to face when we have the option of crushing him through the back door?" She was like, "Let's inform Mia about Rick's plan and ruin his surprise. The thing is, no matter how pissed off I am with my brother, I don't want to stab at his back using Mia. I mean, if I tell Mia that Rick is going to propose to her at my wedding, she is going to freak out and impulsively break up with him. But if we could stop Rick from proposing to her, who knows their relationship might sustain, and they might even end up getting married in the future. He is my brother, and I want to see him happy. I don't know what I'm going to do next." Update 3. Some people have the habit of desperately diving into hot water and then complaining about their skin burn. I didn't want to use Mia to get rid of my problem, but Rick left me with no choice. Despite telling him multiple times that he was not allowed to propose at my wedding, he still went ahead with his plans. He called my photographer and gave him the instructions that just before Andrea walked down the aisle, he would be going down on his knees to propose to Mia. The cameraman is instructed to capture all the moments from different angles as they're going to make an exclusive video of the proposal. I was like, WTF? I called him up and yelled so badly. I don't remember the exact words, but I was damn rude, and I used cuss words at him. First time ever. I can't tell you what happened after that. The entire family ganged up against me. This man-child ran to everyone, uncles, aunts, and grandparents, to narrate about the verbal abuse. He said I abused him and didn't let him propose to his girlfriend at my wedding. Surprisingly, no one thinks him to be wrong. They are like, why do I have a problem with that? Mia is Rick's girlfriend, and he can propose to her wherever he wants. I said, sure, he can, but not at someone's wedding, duh. Everyone went into the mood of boycotting my wedding. My father asked me if I could let him propose at the start of the event or at the end. I said, no way. He cannot propose at my wedding venue on that day. Period. Enough of his narcissism. Amidst this, Mia calls me and tells me she found her missing ring lying at the corner of the closet. Rick had smartly kept back the ring in the corner of the closet so that Mia drops her suspicions, and that's what happened. She apologized to me for suspecting Rick. I asked her if she's going to break up with him. She said, no, not yet. When I move out for my master's, we'll see how things go. I said, okay, and hung up. I thought for a while and then texted Mia to come home. I told her the whole truth. She was absolutely horrified. She said she has told Rick that she has no plans of marrying now and that she wants to finish her master's first. She was like, how could anyone be so dumb to not get a clue from this? She said she was going to break up with him right then. I said, do whatever you want, but don't drag me into this. She said, we are even. I saved her from the embarrassment, and she was going to save my day. Mia, Andrea, and I sat down to create a perfect monologue for Mia to break up. Mia called up Rick and said she had got the scholarship to study masters at a reputed college in London, and she would be moving there next month. Yeah, it was all made up, but we needed to get rid of him. And once the breakup phase was over, who would go and check if she had actually moved out or not? And if anyone does, we'll deal later. Rick was heartbroken to hear about Mia moving to the UK. He was like, how could you leave me alone suddenly? He said he needed some time to figure out his work in London so that he could move in with her. He even suggested that she postpone her admission by a year so that he could have some more time to put his life together in London. She cut him off and said she's breaking up with him, and she's moving alone, and she doesn't want him there. He went silent for a moment. Maybe he couldn't contemplate what he heard. He just hung up. We thought he was processing the breakup, but the next moment Mia got a call from her apartment security guard saying that a man was banging on her door and creating chaos. Rick thought Mia was inside her apartment and was not answering the doorbell. Mia asked the security to throw him away or call the cops if he didn't go. Then there were a series of voicemails, texts, and calls from Rick. She didn't answer his calls. His voicemail said he was planning a beautiful event to propose to her. And this is what he's getting in return: abandonment. We burst out in laughter at his childishness. Mia said she would attend our wedding, but we need to ensure that Rick doesn't create a scene. I said, now that you have broken up with him, we are going to hand over the man-baby to the family to handle. I called up Mom and told her that Mia has broken up with Rick because she was moving to the UK, and Rick is creating a scene at her door. So better watch out for her golden boy. If they didn't want to deal with cops, that was it. Mom and Dad rushed out to bring him home. Then the whole family sat down to counsel the man-baby and help him cope with a breakup. It wasn't surprising because this has happened every single time he has been dumped. That's his way of getting over a breakup. Andrea and I also showed up to console Rick. We got a soft blame because Mia was our friend. They were like, how could your stupid friend dump our sweet boy? Andrea acted her part and said Mia was a hopper, and maybe Rick deserves someone better. We both are still laughing at the situation. I know someone's misery is someone's gain, but we really cannot help breaking in this situation. Now on to the next story. Story 7. Caught my wife sending nudes to her stepbrother and was planning on secret hookups. So I exposed their affair at a family barbecue, and now everyone is disgusted at them. I, 25 male, met my wife, 24 female, in high school. We were friends during the first few years. I always had a crush on her and asked her to prom during our senior year, and we've been together ever since. We ended up getting married about 6 months after graduation because she got pregnant. That's not to say that we didn't love each other. She was my best friend, the person who meant the most to me in the entire world. We just had to rush things along a little bit. We both come from a small, conservative town and people talk. We thought it was the best option for us. She has always been close with her family, closer than I was with mine. Sometimes I thought it was strange, but the more I was welcomed into it, I was a little jealous. Her family shared things, and everyone was genuinely happy to be around each other. Her mom had remarried shortly before we got together, so she had a new stepfather and stepbrother and sister. We moved out into our own apartment and started living our life. She got a job helping at the library in town, and I started working at my dad's construction company. Everything was going very well for us. Her mom helped with the baby a lot. We enjoyed a simple life with good friends and a loving family. For years later, not much had changed, but my father told me he was retiring, and I would be in control of his construction company. With this promotion came a huge increase in pay. We were going to be able to buy a house and start saving up for college. I was ecstatic. However, the workload was surprisingly much more than I thought it would be. I was used to working 4 10-hour days, but with my new responsibilities, I was working 5 to 6 days a week and averaging about 70 total hours. I could feel the strain it was putting on my marriage, but I figured it was the best way to make sure our kids had everything they needed. Things went on like that for a while. All the while, when I was at work, she would be home or with her family. I didn't expect anything was going on. Even having suspicions about it seemed wrong. But here I am writing this post. During the spring and summer, work always gets incredibly busy, so I'm around at home less and less. Recently, I'd noticed that my wife's stepbrother was coming around more often to hang out while I was out. It seemed perfectly normal. He was with his stepsister and nephew. I had no reason to suspect anything else was happening. He called her and texted her. They would chat on Snapchat all the time, things that I interpreted as normal activity. One night I was off work, and my wife and I were alone watching a movie. I ran to the kitchen to get us some popcorn, and I saw her phone on the table. I didn't immediately decide that I was going to go through it. I picked it up, planning on just bringing it to her because she left it there. When I hovered over the screen, I saw that she had a message from her stepbrother asking for her to think of an excuse to go to his house. I thought it was weird. My mind didn't immediately go to the reality of what was happening. While the popcorn was still in the microwave, I did a quick look to see what the context of the message was. They were both exchanging suggestive messages about wanting to be together again. He even said how he'd had a thing for her since before their parents got married. My wife agreed and said that it was fortunate they never had a chance to explore what they had. I scrolled further back and saw messages and videos they'd shared with each other. I felt sick to my stomach. I actually thought I might collapse on the ground and vomit. No, they're not blood-related, but they're still family. It was disgusting to me. On top of that, she'd been hanging out with him in our home with our child. My mind ran through countless different scenarios of what could have happened. Right away, I confronted my wife. We had a huge blowout argument, which resulted in her storming out, no doubt going to her stepbrother. I began looking into divorce. The following morning, I considered my options about what to say to her family. 2, she came back late the next day and we had a discussion. I was still very angry, but our child was home and awake, so I didn't want to upset him. She begged me not to tell anyone about it, saying it would destroy her family. She tried to convince me it was a momentary lapse in judgment, but I wouldn't listen. I told her I wouldn't tell her family, but I knew that was a lie. She betrayed my trust, so I was going to get back at her. A few months had passed and she and I ended everything. I moved out and we were still in the midst of figuring out custody. I had no idea what she was telling her family about our separation, but I told mine the truth. I picked my son up from her house, and he told me all about a huge family barbecue they were having the following weekend. It was the perfect time for me to come clean. Nobody had any idea I would even be going to the event. I just showed up uninvited. Everyone was curious about why I was there. I definitely didn't feel welcome, so I figured I'd make my point and then leave. I joined a group of people at a table, including her mom, stepfather, and stepbrother, and I told them everything. Her stepbrother looked like he wanted to leap over the table and strangle me. But instead, he denied my claims and called me a liar. I think everyone around us knew that his impassioned denial was too defensive to not be at least a little bit true. Her mom pulled me aside and asked me how I knew. I could tell it broke her heart, and I felt bad about being the one to tell her, but she needed to know. I ended up leaving the barbecue with my son for the rest of the weekend. Apparently, neither of them is welcome at any other family gatherings, and most of her family thinks they're disgusting for what they did. Now on to the next story. Story 8. My daughter cut me off 5 years ago because of a misunderstanding. Then, she demanded to move in after getting fired. When I refused, she blasted me online and turned friend and family against me. I, a 46-year-old man, have a 22-year-old daughter who hasn't spoken to me for 5 years but recently got back in touch because she needed my help. My daughter, whom I will refer to as Lily, is my one and only child, and we had a great relationship until 5 years ago. I was previously married to my ex-wife, whom I will refer to as Sarah, 45F. Sarah and I met in college and started dating in our second year. Shortly after we graduated, we got married, and then we had Lily. But that marriage did not last long because we were just way too different, and we realized that we had rushed into things. So we decided to get a divorce when Lily was 2 years old. We had been fighting a lot, and we believed that it would be better for us to separate for our daughter's sake, since it was not healthy for her to grow up in such a toxic environment. So we went our separate ways, but we still shared custody of Lily, so we were on good terms. The divorce was a mutual thing, and my wife and I were pretty much on equal footing financially, so there was no alimony or child support involved. Everything was amicable, and even though we were not friends, we were all right. Lily spent half the month at her mother's place and half at mine, and it was a convenient arrangement for both of us. I did not get married a second time, but around 6 years ago, Sarah got married to her boyfriend of 2 years. Her husband, Liam, had also been married before and had 2 kids, a daughter around Lily's age and a younger son 2 years younger than his daughter. I was invited to the wedding, and everything was quite warm and pleasant. Her husband seemed like a nice man, and his kids were shy but polite. It all looked fine on the surface, but I realized that Lily did not seem happy at the wedding at all. And when I asked her about it, she told me that she didn't like the idea of sharing her house with those kids. Then she went on to complain about how annoying both of them were and how she wished her mother hadn't married this man. He didn't have a problem with Liam, just to be clear, but just his kids. Lily always had a problem with sharing, but the way she was speaking at the wedding made me feel like she was being a bit entitled, and I told her so. I tried to be polite and sugarcoat it for her, but I had to tell her that she was off a tad bit entitled. Instead of making a face at her mother's wedding, she should be out there being social and happy for her mother. She did not take that kindly and got mad at me, so she didn't speak to me for the rest of the day. That was the first time that I realized how much she didn't like the other kids. I happened to discuss it with Sarah later on, and she told me that she had noticed a couple of times that whenever Liam would come over with his kids, Lily would never put in an effort to socialize with them or even speak to them. She would just lock herself in her room and then stay there until everybody left. This was only the case when Liam came over with his kids, but when it was just him, she didn't seem to mind it. She found it a bit concerning because now, whenever Liam's kids were not with their mother, they would be living with her, and Lily had to get along with them. Otherwise, it would be very difficult for them to live as a family. We decided that we were going to speak to Lily, but it didn't help because she just got mad at both of us and accused us of only caring about how our family appeared to the other kids and not about her feelings. So we tried to get her into therapy because, as far as we knew, Liam's kids hadn't even said anything to her, but she already seemed to hate them for absolutely no reason. And to be honest, Lily had always had behavioral issues, but it never happened to be this aggressive. We had had a few complaints about her during school that she was being rude to others, to the point of making them cry with the way she would speak to them when she didn't like somebody. She wasn't a bully. She would only just interact badly with people who tried to speak to her, and she didn't like them. We had tried counseling back then as well for a while, and the complaints stopped. But with Liam and his kids, we were afraid that she would resume that behavior, and he didn't want that to happen because, of course, nobody would want their kids to get bullied for no reason. So we tried to send her to therapy, but this time she was much more resistant than before because she was almost an adult, and she kept telling us that she did not want to go because she knew there was nothing wrong with her. Sarah and I did our best, but we couldn't make her go, and after a while we just gave up. More than being worried about how she would behave with Liam's kids and how this would affect Sarah's marriage, I was worried about Lily and her behavior in the future because if it didn't improve, then it could badly impact career opportunities and stuff like that. So I kept asking Sarah how Lily was behaving at home whenever Liam's kids would come around, and she always told me the same thing, that she would ignore them and be pretty nasty to them whenever they would try to talk to her. So they mostly avoided her, and the younger son seemed to be scared of her. Liam hadn't said anything about it, but she could tell that he did not approve of this behavior at all. About a year passed, and Lily went away to college, and so did her stepsister. They went to different colleges, so they didn't have to interact much and would only come back for the holidays. Lily would spend half the holidays with her mother and the other half with me. We tried our best to keep Lily's behavior in check, but one day she came over to my house in the middle of the night, and it was actually Sarah's turn to have her. So I was pretty surprised when she showed up and asked her what was going on. To which she told me that she had decided to leave her mother's house permanently because she couldn't stand Liam's kids anymore. She complained to me that his daughter was always in her room reading, and she was convinced that, apparently, this was all an act to show her how intellectual she was, and she couldn't stand it anymore. She was also pissed off about the fact that, apparently, his daughter had been bragging about her higher GPA and had been telling her father about it at the dinner table in an obvious attempt to rub it in her face. And also that his younger son was always being annoying and always seemed to be playing video games with his friends, which meant that there were always 2 or more young teen boys in their house, and she felt like she had no privacy anymore. These were serious accusations, and I told her that she could sit in the living room while I sorted this out with her mother. But she got mad at me the second I said that I was going to talk to her mother about this and asked me if I didn't trust her. So we got into a bit of a fight over that, but eventually she agreed to let me talk to Sarah and sort this out. So I called Sarah, who didn't even know that Lily had snuck out of the house because she had been very silent about it, and it was pretty late at night, so she didn't even fathom that she would do such a thing. But anyway, once I told her about all the accusations that Lily had made against her, she told me that none of it was true and that Lily was just making up things to be mad about. Apparently, Liam's daughter had only spoken about her grades because Liam had asked her about it, and it was in no way an attempt at anything. She was just casually mentioning it to her father like a normal person does, and it had nothing to do with Lily. And about the reading thing, even I had found it a bit hard to believe when Lily accused her of being pretentious just for reading. And Sarah confirmed for me that she had always been that way, and even that had nothing to do with Lily. She was just making it all about herself because she wanted a reason to hate her step-siblings, and in reality, There was no reason for her to. Even the younger son and whatever she had said about him was just partly true. He did invite his friends over a couple of times, but they didn't even make any noise and neither did they leave their room, so there was no reason for Lily to feel like she had no privacy in her house anymore. And all of it made sense honestly because, as far as I had interacted with Liam and his children, it seemed very unlikely that they would be the kind of people that Lily was trying to make them out to be. After I got off the phone, I was quite disappointed because I knew that Lily was lying and she just wanted to paint her step-siblings in a bad light because she hated them for no reason. I felt like Sarah and I had failed as parents because she had grown up to be very entitled and constantly acted like everybody else was beneath her. It was a difficult decision, but I decided that I was going to have to talk to Lily and tell her once and for all that she couldn't just act out and accuse people of things that they weren't even guilty of just because she didn't like them, because it was a horrible thing to do, and that's not the way we had raised her. So, whether she liked it or not, she would have to be civil to her step-siblings at the very least and put up with them for as long as she was living with her mother. When I told her this, she got really pissed off and started screaming at me and accused me of siding with the others just because I wanted to get rid of her. I honestly don't even know where that came from because I had never behaved in a way that would make her feel that way. I had always tried to make her feel loved and done my best to treat her as a priority, so for her to accuse me of trying to get rid of her was absolutely crazy, and it was also deeply hurtful because I loved my daughter and I would do anything for her. She knew it. The only thing that I was not willing to do was put up with bad behavior or encourage it because it was also important for me to discipline her and make sure that she was a good human being. That's all that I was trying to do. I tried to explain that to her, but she just kept screaming at me, and it just didn't seem like she was willing to listen to me at all. So I waited for her to calm down, but she just stormed out of the house without even giving me a chance to explain why I did what I did. I tried to call after her because it was quite late, and I didn't want her to go back home alone since it was also snowing and the roads were slippery, but she didn't respond to me. I tried to chase her down, but she had driven her car, and it started driving by the time I left my house. So I was quite disappointed, and I had to go back home. But I tried to text her and tell her that I just wanted her to be a better human being. And of course, I wanted her to be around because she was my daughter, but I found that she had already blocked me, and that message didn't go through. I tried to call her a little while later, but even then I got no response. When I called Sarah to ask if she had reached home safely, she told me that she had, but she didn't want to speak to me and had been very upset. The next day, I decided to pay Sarah a visit so I could speak to Lily, but as soon as she saw me in the living room, she started throwing a fit. She started screaming at the top of her lungs and demanded that I leave her alone, and she didn't want to hear anything. She didn't want an explanation, and she just wanted me to go. She told me that she never wanted anything to do with me again, and that I was not her father anymore, since I had shown her that I didn't want her around, and I was only trying to get rid of her all the time. I still tried to talk to her through her screaming, but it was too overwhelming, and I had to leave. After that, I tried to talk to her every single day, and I would visit Sarah regularly, but the same thing happened every time. After a week of this, Sarah and I decided that I had better stay away for a while, and if Lily wanted to talk to me, then she would probably come to me herself, but until then, I would just have to stay away because it was getting very tiring for everyone. I would come over every day, and then Lily would refuse to talk to me, come out of her room, and start screaming at anybody who tried to explain my side of things to her. So I decided that I would not try to talk to her until she had calmed down, and I expected her to reach out to me herself within a couple of weeks or maybe months at the most, but she never bothered. I kept in touch with Sarah and kept asking her about Lily, but it was quite disheartening because apparently Lily had told Sarah that she did never want to hear from me again and that she was done with me. She tried to tell me that things would work themselves out eventually, but years passed and nothing happened, and I gave up hope of reconciling with Lily. She graduated from college, and I expected her to at least inform me or invite me to her graduation ceremony. But she didn't, so I just told Sarah to congratulate her on my behalf, but I never got a response to that either. And then she got her first job a few years ago, but even then she did not reach out to me. I tried to move on with my life, but this is my daughter we were talking about, so it was obviously very difficult for me to forget about everything. But I had to also respect her choice, so I did not reach out to her because I felt that if she wanted to, she would contact me herself, and until then, I would just have to make do with whatever memories I had of her. It was quite difficult, but I had to get through it somehow. And then, about 10 days ago, I finally heard back from Lily. She called me up, and I answered, not knowing what to expect because 5 years had passed, and we hadn't spoken even a word to each other, so I didn't know what she was going to say to me. She started off by telling me that she had bad news and that she had been fired from her job because of insubordination. She went on to complain about her boss, who was apparently an idiot, and that's why she had refused to listen to her, so that got her fired because it was her third strike, and the company couldn't tolerate it anymore. Apparently, she had not changed a bit since the last time that we interacted, and that was bad news because, judging by her personality, she only got worse with time, and I'm pretty sure that's the reason why she got fired. I desperately wanted to say something about it, but I refrained because I thought that she was building up to something, so I let her continue ranting about her boss, who didn't even sound like much of an idiot if I am being very honest. Anyway, once she was done talking about that, she told me that this was not something recent and had apparently happened a few months ago. Since then, she had been looking for a job but with no success because everyone in her industry sort of knew about her temperament, and nobody wanted to hire her right now. So she was out of a job and hadn't been able to pay rent for the past few months. She wanted me to help her out by letting her live with me for the next few months until she was back on her feet again. I was really mad about it because 5 years had passed since we had last spoken to each other, and she was just calling me out of the blue, even though she knew very well that she and I were not exactly on good terms right now. The least that she could have done was at least apologize to me for the way that she had behaved all those years ago, but that was obviously way too much to expect from my daughter, given her behavior on most days. But I had thought that the most obvious choice for her would be to approach her mother for this kind of thing since they were on good terms, so I asked her about it. And she told me that the reason that she wasn't living with her mother right now was because she had already asked about it, and Sarah had apparently declined. On hearing that, I was quite shocked because Sarah was the kind of woman who would support her no matter what, and that's what she had been doing so far. Sure, she would get pissed off at Lily occasionally, but she would never let her down when it really came down to it, and would always be there to help her out. So it was shocking to me that she was refusing to let Lily stay with her when she was in need of it. But then Lily clarified it for me pretty soon and told me that the reason she couldn't live with them was because their house was already occupied by too many guests since her husband's family had come to live with them for a while, and there was no space for her there. So, as much as Sarah would have loved to have Lily over, it was just not possible, and that's why she had come to ask me for help and referred to me as her last resort. Now, up until that point, I was still willing to entertain the idea of letting her live with me, even though she hadn't apologized for anything. But once she called me her last resort, I got really mad because you don't say things like that when you are asking somebody for their help, especially when that person is somebody you have refused to even speak to for the last 5 years just because her ego was too massive to handle the fact that maybe not the entire world thinks that she is perfect as she is, and somebody actually had the guts to say that to her. That's the problem that she had with me. That I was honest with her and I tried to make her a better person, and she misconstrued it on purpose and turned it into something ugly just because she couldn't accept some pretty valid criticism. At least now I had expected her to apologize to me and try to make amends for the past. But there was no apology, and on top of that, she actually expected me to help her out and let her live with me after calling me her last resort, making it very obvious that she didn't want to stay with me and would rather have stayed with her mother instead. So, out of anger, I told her that she was not welcome in my home and she could look for someplace else to live because I was simply not interested in helping her out here in any way, shape, or form. And she had the audacity to actually be outraged when I told her that I was not going to take her in and she had to look out for herself. She started screaming at me on the phone and told me that I was being a terrible father yet again when she had served me the chance to remedy the past on a silver platter to me. And I told her that I really didn't mind being a bad parent because she was an even worse daughter, and she kind of deserved this. Then I hung up the phone before she could start yelling at me again, and I blocked her number because I did not have time to waste on her, and I just wanted to get along with my day. But a few hours later, Sarah started calling me, and even when I ignored her for the first few times, she did not stop calling until I picked up the call. I had ignored it the first few times because I knew that she was going to yell at me about Lily, and honestly, I really didn't need that just after I had been yelled at by her for being a terrible father. So I told her that I wasn't interested in talking about it as soon as I answered the phone. Sarah told me that she was terribly disappointed in me and said that I was being selfish and not thinking about the bigger picture here. I couldn't even understand what the bigger picture was because, to me, it just sounded like they were making up excuses for her terrible behavior. So we got into an argument, and Sarah told me that she was not interested in speaking to me until I apologized to our daughter and decided to take her in. That has not happened yet, and they are going around calling me selfish and heartless and whatnot. It has come to a point where I really have to consider if I actually am being any of those things. I really don't understand what I did wrong here because, as far as I am concerned, I reacted like any other person would. I did refuse to take my daughter in because she didn't apologize to me. Update 1. Hi. I am back here after almost 3 days of making my post, and I have come to the conclusion that I did nothing wrong. So that's pretty nice for me. I also decided to call Sarah up and tell her that she had to cut it out because she had been telling all our common friends that I was being selfish by not letting Lily stay with me. I could understand that she was upset, and that was completely her decision, but she could not go around saying bad things about me when I hadn't even done anything and expect me to be okay with it. That was simply not acceptable to me, and I told her so. But then she got mad at me because she thought that it was a pretty jerk move for me to call her after 10 days for this, but I didn't think it was important to call her to talk about our daughter, and apparently, I felt that it was more important to make sure that my image among our friends was not ruined because of what I was doing. I told her that it was because she was blatantly lying about me as a person and only telling people stuff that she knew would ruin my image and ignoring all the other things, like what Lily had said and done all those years ago. Then she actually tried to tell me to grow up and stop having such a meltdown about things that happened 6 years ago and that I needed to move on from it because it was just not that significant anymore, and it was pathetic of me to still hold it against my daughter and use it as an excuse not to help her out when she was clearly in trouble. I was shocked that she was the one saying this because back when it had actually happened, she had been on my side, but now she was acting like it was simply no big deal, and I should just forget about all of it. I'm not going to get my time back, and it's all Lily's own fault. So I think she should face the consequences of her actions because it's a very important lesson to learn, and I can't help her at least until she apologizes to me. Once I have been very clear about my terms, and if they can deal with it, then I'm good, and if not, it's still their loss and not mine, so I have nothing to worry about. The only reason I even called Sarah up was because I wanted her to stop talking crap about me to my friends, and that's it. She was the one who brought up all those things about me and Lily and tried to act like a shrink or something. It's not my fault that didn't work out well for her. But yeah, anyway, that's what happened, and now if she stops talking about me, that's great, and if she doesn't, well, that's on her. I am not going to call her anymore because I have nothing more to say to her or Lily, and I don't want to drag this out. Update 2. Hi, so recently I called Sarah up to tell her that she needed to stop talking about me to my friends and trying to ruin my image in front of them. And for a while, she didn't do any of that, but little did I know that she and Lily were just preparing for a much bigger attack on me. And that happened a few hours ago. I started getting a bunch of calls and texts from a lot of my friends, and they were all telling me that I needed to check out social media and go to Lily's account to see what she and Sarah had posted about me. I knew instantly that this could not be something good, and as soon as I checked out their post, my heart dropped because they had just said the most horrible things that one can imagine about a person. And the worst part was that most of my family were talking about how they had always known that I was going to fail as a father and had no faith in me. Even a few of my friends agreed with the things that had been said in the post, and it really broke my heart because I thought I was on good terms with these people, but clearly not. I was extremely disappointed that this was the route that Lily and Sarah had chosen to take because it was quite violent and unnecessarily dramatic. I can't lie. That post really broke me, and I ended up crying for a few minutes after I read that post because it was scathing to say the least, and they really tore into me and called me every single derogatory name you can imagine. My daughter even said that some of her friends did not have fathers at all, and she actually believed that they were much luckier than her because at least their fathers didn't suck. I mean, that's going to hurt, and the objective of that post was to hurt my feelings, so I would say that they succeeded in doing so. But I decided to take the high road and not respond to that post at all because I was not going to dignify any of that, so I simply blocked them and went on with my day. And I also told all my friends that I did not want to hear anything about them anymore because they were free to do whatever they wanted to, and so was I. They are not my family anymore, and I don't want to hear anything that they have to say about me. Update 3. I recently received a text from Sarah, and she told me that Lily had decided that she was going to move away from the city because there were no job opportunities for her anymore, and she didn't want to waste any more of her time. She already had bagged a moderately good position in another company and was moving away in a couple of days, so they were throwing her a farewell party, and she wanted to invite me to it. It's been almost 3 months since I cut them off, and it's been great so far, so I don't really want to go back to that life. This is why I declined that invitation and blocked my ex-wife's number because now that I was not speaking to Lily anymore, There was really no reason for me to continue speaking to her. I am honestly much happier without both of them in my life, and I intend on keeping it that way. Now on to the next story. Story 9. My wife became an overprotective mom. She refused to let anyone near our kids, and now it's ruining our marriage. My wife, let's call her Laura, and I have been together for 14 years and married for 9. We were together since high school and had our first everything by some luck. We managed to get through the odds of high school lovers breaking up and managed to get married at 20. I enrolled in university while she worked part-time to support our expenses. We were grateful, as my parents had paid for my college, and her parents helped us rent an apartment so we didn't have too much debt or any other financial obligations. We had a small wedding in between when I was in uni with just immediate family. Within a few months after our wedding, we realized that she was pregnant. Needless to say, we weren't thrilled. Our initial plan was for me to finish university and get a job so that she could go back to studying and get her degree before we planned a family. Before everyone yells at me, no, we weren't being careless. We used protection. She was on birth control and I used condoms every now and then too, for the sake of additional safety. Our baby girl was a force to reckon with, and no birth control was stopping her from coming into the world and kicking our asses. Laura wasn't so overjoyed during the initial months of her pregnancy. I did mention the A word once, if she wanted to, and told her I would be fully supportive either way. She instantly shut me down, saying that wasn't an option. She comes from a pretty religious family. We didn't even have sex until 2 years into the relationship. We were only allowed to move in together because I popped the question and made her my fiancée around the 4th month. We found out the gender, and I saw my wife slowly warming up to the idea of having an actual human being inside her. In almost 18 weeks, she felt the first movement of the baby inside her stomach. Now that I think of it, it was an instant change, though I didn't realize it then. Looking back, it was all right there from her very first pregnancy. Before we got the pregnancy news, she had applied for an accounting course and had gotten an admission. I had found a job by then. She had even started her classes and continued attending them, though she was pregnant. I first noticed her reluctance around week 30 when she continuously took a few sick leaves, even though she wasn't sick. I confronted her about it, and she broke down, saying she didn't want to attend uni while pregnant because her stomach was getting big, and everyone was noticing that she was actually pregnant. At first, I thought she was embarrassed to be pregnant in front of her classmates at a relatively young age, but upon further talking to her, I realized that she wasn't embarrassed. Rather, she was afraid someone would try to hurt her. She was terrified of falling down the stairs or slipping, or eating something she wasn't supposed to, or drinking alcohol accidentally, etc. I was confused and, like any other person, thought her fears were way too irrational. Why would anyone try to purposefully hurt a pregnant woman? I asked her if she felt like she was being threatened by someone, and she simply shook her head no. She begged me to let her drop out just until the baby was old enough to go to daycare or be placed with a babysitter. She promised me she'd continue with her studies after. Fast forward a couple more months, and she gives birth to our beautiful baby girl. I was so instantly in love with her, and so was my wife. During the remaining months of her pregnancy, my wife rarely went out, and that too only for appointments at the doctor. I called her mother and asked her to be with my wife for some time so that she wouldn't be alone all day. My wife wasn't a big fan of that idea either, but she liked the idea of not having to do rough jobs around the house since her mother would help her out. After delivery was the worst. My wife didn't let anyone help her out with the baby. Since my wife and I are the oldest in our families, our little girl is the first grandchild on both sides. Everyone was so excited to meet her, but my wife was so on the fence and overwhelmed with anyone holding our daughter that it started annoying everyone. Soon, everyone started talking behind her back. I tried my best to defend her and asked all our relatives to give us space since she was a new mom and needed her space. Laura didn't let anyone help her out with her daughter. She barely let me take care of my own child. She was overworked and running on no sleep but would still let no one help her out with our baby. Not even me. Once she fell asleep for almost 6 hours after not getting any sleep for days. I didn't wake her up because I wanted her to get some decent sleep and took care of our baby by myself. I fed her the bottle of milk Laura had pumped and changed her diapers, etc. When Laura woke up, all hell broke loose, and she started having a mental breakdown, calling me a terrible person for basically letting her sleep. She called herself a horrible mother for not being awake to care for our child. At this point, even I was overwhelmed and frustrated. I put our daughter to bed and shut the door before sitting her down and having a long, shall I say, argument with her. She started crying, explaining she was scared something would happen to our child if she wasn't there to take care of her. She had read about conditions where babies have passed away suddenly or while being entrusted to someone else who is not the mother. I didn't understand if this was normal or not at that time. I wrote it off as a mother being concerned about her baby. I have heard about new mothers having their hormones all over the place. I told her I understood she didn't want another person near our child, but that she had no right to keep me away. I explained that we are a team and we would be raising our baby together, not just her alone. Since that day, she loosened the knot just a little with me, to give me enough gap to take care of our baby, to give her time to get some good sleep. As our daughter grew older, I tried to convince her to go back to college and that we could send our daughter to daycare or ask one of the grandparents to babysit while she was at uni. She quickly shut down the idea, saying that our daughter was a toddler and now was a very important time for her since she will start retaining memories. She said there's no way she'll let her daughter get attached to someone else, as it was her responsibility to raise the baby and not anyone else's. I tried my best to convince her that her education was important. I told her that if someday, God forbid, something happened to me, she will need a degree to get some decent jobs so she can take care of our child and herself, or that she will be struggling to make ends meet. This seemed to get through her, and she finally agreed to study, but that too was only an online course that she could study at home. She just had to write an exam at a test center as per requirement. When our daughter turned 3, we found out that my wife was pregnant again. We were still on protection, so I was confused as to how this happened. I asked her about it, and she admitted to sometimes forgetting about taking her pills on time. I wanted to get mad at her, but it felt wrong to put all the blame on her because the burden of contraception didn't have to fall all on her, and I wasn't being very careful either. Since I had a stable and comfortable paying job, money wasn't a big issue. Since our parents had helped us out in the beginning, we were able to save up a bit over the years without any huge student loans. It was the same thing all over again with baby number 2. She wouldn't leave the house much. The only people she really let be around her were me and her mother, sometimes her sister too. She rarely left the house except for anything our child needed, or for appointments, etc., or if she had any exams she needed to take. I tried talking to her about it again, but she was never interested in addressing the issue of being so possessive. The baby was born, and there she was all over again, never letting anyone other than me, or extremely rarely even her mom, around her and the kids. I remember seeing dark circles under her eyes and telling her there was no need for her to take on so much of the load by herself, that she could let me take at least a quarter of it when I'm home. She kept saying she didn't like the way anyone else handled things, etc. Even our sex life took a big hit after our second baby because my wife was exhausted and drooping by the time she returned to bed. Sometimes she'd even get the kids to sleep in between us because she felt horrible making them sleep alone in another room. She stopped at once she saw an article about a baby dying because of co-sleeping, after which she gave me a huge lecture to make sure that I would never do that. I literally had no intention anyway. I was desperate by this point, but as time went by, I learned to give in and just let her handle the children the way she wanted. Whatever she was doing, it was all anyway for the safety of our children, so I guessed it couldn't be too bad. Our kids grew up, and I made sure to use protection always while having sex after that, much to her dismay, but at that point I didn't care. Laura had calmed down a little since the kids got older, and I in no way wanted it to go back to how it was with a new baby. Laura was still very involved and overly cautious of our children. She found work close to our house once our youngest was old enough for preschool. She would drop them both off at school before heading to work and pick them both up before returning. We have school buses on our route, but whenever I mention it, she brings up the statistics of school bus accidents and bullying, saying it's not a good idea. Our oldest has a best friend and had asked us to let her sleep over at her friend's house, and my wife almost blew up at the request. My daughter cried all night, and I had to cuddle her to sleep, to comfort her and promise her loads of books she loves reading to get her to stop crying. I had to convince her best friend's parents to let the sleepover be at our house instead. Our youngest is 5 now, and my wife is pregnant again with our third child. She convinced me one night. I will not go into too much detail about how she seduced me, but if you are a man reading this, you'll know how tempting it is when they whisper in your ears and tell you to finish inside. Since my wife had calmed down relatively from before, I thought maybe as we got older she's gotten a bit easier on herself and the children. Now, all of this was just important background. What actually happened was something that occurred a week ago. While playing a sport in school last week, a random small boy in my daughter's class accidentally kicked a ball in our daughter's direction and hit her head. The teachers quickly took her to the hospital, and she had to get stitches. Safe to say, my wife went ballistic. She got hysterical and started crying. Our daughter is okay, and the stitches will heal in no time, but my wife is not taking it well. When the boy's parents visited us to formally apologize with their son, an 8-year-old boy who looked terrified out of his wits, my wife went crazy. Angry at the parents, she started threatening to sue them for damages and get restraining orders. I have no idea where that idea came from. The parents were shocked. I quickly apologized to them and sent them on their way. My wife kept rambling about suing them. She then talked about pulling the kids off school so she could homeschool them. According to her, that is the safest choice, plus with all the school shootings she's been hearing around the country. She kept going on and on about how school was unnecessary and dangerous. After that, I did something I'm not proud of. I yelled at her. I was so mad and frustrated and annoyed. Years of pent-up frustration just poured out of me. I think for a moment I forgot she was even pregnant with my baby. She looked at me with teary eyes before getting up and walking away. It's been almost a week now, and neither of us has taken the effort to apologize or speak to each other. The only communication we have is regarding the children. I am absolutely adamant about not pulling the kids out of school. They deserve to have a normal school life with friends and a typical growing-up experience. I'm not about to take that away from them because my wife gets crazy protective over them. I don't know how to handle this. Other than this one issue, our life is great. She's honestly the best woman I could have met. I know she loves me, and I love her too. The funniest part is, before the kids, my wife was an extremely shy person. She hated confrontation and would run away from arguments. She had a tough time making friends because of how shy she was, but it all changed once she became a mom. I must say, in the beginning, it was beautiful for me, as the father of our children and her husband, to see how a shy and timid woman could go fierce and loud when it affected her baby. But the love/obsession she has over our kids now is getting too much for me, and now even for our kids. It's already starting to suffocate my daughter. It's putting a dent in our relationship because she always wants to have the final say when it comes to decisions regarding the kids. I want to have an equal say in the matters of our kids without being made to look like a villain for having a different opinion than her. We have another one on the way, and at this point I'm scared. I've already booked an appointment with a doctor to get a vasectomy. I'm done with our third one. I'm already dreading how she's going to be with the new little boy born. I'm already looking into therapy, but it's going to be a bit hard to convince her. Is there anything else I can do to get her relaxed over the children? I hate watching our relationship crumble like this. Comments where OP has replied. Comment 1. You should have solved this before having a second child. Never mind a third. Your wife needs therapy desperately, and she will destroy your children's ability to function in the real world. OP. The last thing I'll ever have to worry about my wife doing with our kids is physically hurting them. She panics when they hurt their knee by falling on the ground. She's way too sensitive to even see them get vaccinations because she can't stand the sharp needle stabbing them. I'm not concerned about her physically hurting them. I'm more concerned about her probably mentally draining our children. Comment 2. You need to go talk to your GP about this. You should have done that right after the first baby was born and she started to act like this, but it's never too late to act, and you must act. You are already noticing the effects on your daughter. This will only get worse, and it will have a deep impact on your children's mental health. Your wife's irrational behavior is emotionally abusive for your children. Pick up the phone and make an appointment with your GP right now. Opie. I am absolutely 100% realize this isn't something to take lightly anymore. I'm booking an appointment with a marriage counselor like one of the comments suggested, so that she doesn't feel like I'm calling her crazy by suggesting she go directly to a therapist. I'll talk with the counselor to refer her to a therapist. I'm not putting my foot down with this anymore. I strongly suggest she'd be evaluated for PPA. She needs some serious therapy yesterday before she does irreparable damage to those kids. It's non-negotiable at this point. Opie. I looked into PPA after seeing all the comments. It's so relieving to finally put a name into what I've been seeing for years. The symptoms are everything I've seen in her over the years. If I could describe it, I'd say she has an extreme case of P that it stops her from functioning right with a newborn baby. Comment 3. Did you ever tell her that she could trust you? For myself, I sometimes feel the need to say something out loud to help with making it a reality and not something only inside my head. It's just a thought on what might help ease her anxiety. I've experienced a lot of those same emotions during my pregnancies. Opie. I'm going to try making more of an effort to let her know that she can trust me. I think words of affirmation help her a lot. I just hope she truly believes me. Update 1. September 17, 2023. Hello everyone. I had posted a Reddit post a month ago about how my wife is way overprotective over our kids, that it was affecting our marriage too. This is an update to all that. Just a warning. Something's mentioned towards the latter of this post may be disturbing to some people. Okay, so, to say things happened is an understatement. My wife found the post on my phone 2 days after I had posted it on the site. She saw my notification go off one night when she was up because our youngest had a slight fever. I think at first she assumed I was having an affair or something, and so she went through my phone quickly while I was asleep. It's not a deal breaker for either of us. We have each other's passwords and are free to go through the other's phones whenever we want. It's just that I was way too stupid and forgot to turn the notification off on Reddit. My wife went through the whole post and comments that night. I woke up early morning the next day and couldn't find my wife in bed. I assumed she'd be with my son since he was a bit sick. I checked his room and he was all right, but my wife wasn't there. I searched around the house and then found her sitting in the living room in complete darkness. I turned the lights on, and she looked like a living ghost. Her face was tear-stained, and she didn't look like she was aware of where she was. I rushed to her, scared if something happened. That's when I found my phone with her, and my heart dropped instantly. I tried getting her to talk, but she just wasn't budging at all. After trying to get her to speak for so long, she finally just looked me in the eye and asked, "Am I dangerous to them?" Her voice broke, and it hurt to hear her like that. I didn't know what to tell her. They said I'll kill them. It was like she was hyperventilating, and it was terrifying to see her like that. She told me to leave her alone and continued just staring into nothing for a long time without responding to me. The kids woke up since they had school and went to find my wife like they usually do every morning. The moment my wife saw the kids trying to get to her, it was like she was seeing a ghost. She looked terrified, and she got up from the sofa and quickly walked away to our room and shut herself inside. The children were confused and scared, so I told them I'll drop them off at their grandparents' today and that I'd let them skip school. They were excited and quickly went off to get ready. My daughter came up to me after a while and asked me about what's happening with her mother. She's intuitive, that little one. I explained that her mother was just a little sick and needed some time to get rest and get well. She told me to hug mommy when she feels like crying, 'cause that helps. I hadn't really realized my daughter has seen my wife's anxiety attacks, and it hurt my heart to know that I was oblivious to it. I dropped the kids off at the grandparents before heading back home. I had already booked a session with a therapist for that week. After reading all the feedbacks I got back home, and my wife refused to talk to me or eat or move or literally even do anything. I was a bit scared that she might try to hurt herself, but then she never does anything that could possibly harm herself when she's pregnant. I've noticed that. She asked me about where the kids were, and I could visibly see her displeasure that she was trying to hide when I told her I'd dropped them off at her parents' house. But I guess the comments were still fresh in her mind, and so she fought, trying to fight me on that. Things were difficult for almost a week. I extended the kids' stay at the grandparents and asked her mom to help out, explaining the situation. They were super supportive, and they even dropped the kids off at school every day too. I explained to my wife that I had booked a session for therapy and that I was taking her there no matter what she said. This was the only one thing she didn't fight me on that whole week. To be honest, It was so difficult to find her crying herself to sleep every night. She had random outbursts of panic attacks, and I sometimes found her talking to herself when I got back from work. She started going to therapy, and for the first few sessions it didn't look like there was any difference. She just kept silent. She was on maternity leave, so work wasn't an issue. I took her to her parents' house every alternative day because I could feel her suffocating without seeing the kids, and I knew she was too conflicted with her emotions to ask me to take her to see them. We visited with breakfast, but my wife avoided them like a plague, only seeing them from a distance. Our son tried his best to wiggle his way into her arms, 'cause he missed her, and this was the longest he's gone since he was born without her. But my wife started having panic attacks when he tried to do so, which in turn hurt him. That week was terrible. I spent extra time with our children when she was at home to ensure they know that we love them and that she loved them so much. I told them, "Mommy needs help, and she's sick, and I'm doing everything to make sure she'll be okay." After about 2 weeks, I got the kids back home. My wife had gone to more than 5 sessions by then, and while it wasn't all sparkles and butterflies, she started talking to the children again, though she continued to maintain her distance always. I was now the primary caretaker. She would always be there to tell me what to do because, well, she knows everything about them better than I do. She was talking again to me and her mother. It was a bit better. Around a week ago, after one of her sessions, she came back home and told me that she needed to talk to me. I put the kids to bed, and we locked ourselves in our room to speak. My wife explained how she always wanted to tell this to me, but she never got around to it, and that the therapy sessions with the doctor had finally made her realize that it wasn't fair of her to not explain something like this to me. Like I mentioned in my previous post, I had suspicions that something happened in her first pregnancy that completely altered her attitude towards everything, and I was right. Around her 24th week, 9 years back, my wife met someone. It's crazy how one incident changed the rest of our lives. My wife was still enrolled in uni, and she had quit her part-time job at a diner following the pregnancy, but my wife still frequented the diner to do her homeworks and assignments, etc., when she doesn't have classes, since it's only walking distance. On a day like that, my wife was in the diner and had to use the washroom. She headed to the women's washroom, and after getting inside, she heard noises and painful grunts from someone. It looked like a woman who was moaning in agony. My wife went closer to the stall where the woman was and asked if she needed help. The woman was hesitant, but after some time opened the door to take the offered help. Turns out the woman was miscarrying. She was a middle-aged woman and was around 17 weeks pregnant. It was a huge shock to my wife then, but she didn't hesitate to get down and try to help the woman. The woman was bleeding into the toilet. My wife tried helping her relax, and at some point the woman realized she was pushing the fetus out and asked my wife to catch it since she wanted to bury the baby properly and not just flush it down the drain. My wife explained how she felt like dying when she felt the fetus in her hand. She explained that he was the size of her hand and was all bloody. She wrapped the baby in some spare cloth and helped the woman back on her feet since she was still bleeding. Somehow, she managed to bring the woman to the hospital where the doctors took care of her. My wife stayed with the woman the whole day. The woman had lost her consciousness around halfway, but once she was conscious again, my wife sat by her side to offer moral support. It's during this time the woman told my wife about her story. She explained how her boyfriend is abusive. He had hit her prior that day, and she somehow managed to escape, but her stomach had taken a pretty big hit. She got inside the first restaurant she saw when the pain became unbearable. The woman told her how this was the second baby she's losing. Apparently, around a year ago from then, she had entrusted her 7- and 4-year-old girls with her boyfriend when she went to work. But he threw a party, and instead of keeping an eye on them, he was too occupied. The 4-year-old was playing outside and ran into the road when she saw a cat. A speeding car hit the child, and she died on the spot. As a father, it boiled my blood to hear just how another man could be so careless about his child. I don't understand how she stayed with that man for a year more after that. What a pathetic excuse of a human being. That woman told my wife that no one would care for a child as well as their mother would. She told her to never trust anyone else with her children because no one puts enough effort to ensure the safety of her child as much as she could. My wife has never met her again after that day, But that one incident altered her brain chemistry so much that she started viewing everything and everyone as a threat to our children. It all made sense why she was so careful even just walking when she was pregnant. I mean, I can't imagine what it must have been like to see a lifeless fetus in your hands. There's no wonder why she would avoid every possibility that might lead to it. Also, made sense why she never could trust anyone else with the kids. She probably trusted me with them too only because she loves me and knew deep down that I couldn't hurt her or the kids. I can't imagine what it must have been like to be in your second trimester and have to deliver a miscarried baby. My heart hurts for her every time I think of it. It feels maddening that one day changed our lives so much. My wife told me that she loved our children so much and that she's living for them. But she also explained that she's willing to understand that they are separate human beings who need to grow on their own without her. She doesn't claim to understand yet, but I know she needs time. As of now, the sessions have proved a tiny bit helpful in some of her attitude changes. I'm hopeful that she may come around better as she continues this. She has to unlearn years of trauma-related behaviors. I'm sure they take time. Her therapist gives me regular updates to her condition, and she sounds positive about being able to treat my wife, so maybe it isn't too bad. The doctor has recommended to put my wife on medications for anxiety and stress after the baby is here. She's due in a week, so I'm still nervous about the whole baby number 3 situation, but I'm not letting a new baby stop her from attending therapy. I'm going to make sure she continues for her sake and for our kids' sakes. Update October 2nd, 29th, 2023. I actually uninstalled Reddit a while ago to focus on my family, and recently just came back to notice that this post, that was initially shadow banned and was posted over a month ago. TBH, I got a little scared when I saw the overflowing comments calling me a liar and saying this is all a story. Well, of course, it's Reddit and nobody believes anybody, and I get why. Thank you for your kind comments. It was refreshing to read a positive one amongst all the others. My wife gave birth just a few weeks ago to a healthy baby boy. She's still in therapy, and I'm starting to see small changes in her attitude to our newborn from the previous 2 times. I got a vasectomy like I wanted to and like how all the comments suggested. My wife initially disliked the idea, but she came around. I'm paying more attention to her this time around to make sure she's not overwhelmed in any way. And I can totally get why people think the incident with that woman is fake because, like I said, it took me a lot of time to grasp that something like that happened. But people miscarry in various places all the time. My wife just happened to be there then and assisted a woman who needed help. I don't know what's so unbelievable about it, but I'm not here to convince people what's true or not. I just wanted to share an update when I found out more about what happened to my wife. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.